My name is Feng Jingyi. I was lounging in the Snow Moon house, my brand new brothel, with pretty maids massaging my shoulders and whispering sweet things in my ears. Life was good, but it wasn't always like this. 7 years ago, I woke up in a stranger's body in a strange world. Most people who get transported to another world become princes or nobles. Me? I became the county magistrate of Tuyuan County, the most forgotten, miserable little place you could imagine. When I took over, there were only about 2,000 people here, all starving. My two top officials had actually died of hunger, and the teacher had run off with the refugees. There was no trade, no money, nothing. I nearly lost my mind, but I pulled myself together. I scraped up some grain, brewed a batch of strong liquor, then sent my people out to grab passing merchants and drag them back. We got them drunk on my white wine and talked them into doing business with us. That cracked things open. Meanwhile, the two great kingdoms were at war. Tuyuan was so remote and worthless that the fighting never reached us. 5 years in, the Qian kingdom fell. Emperor Li Che of Jing won everything, and the world settled down. My little county kept growing. I expanded the town again and again. I rebuilt the government office. I opened a gambling house, a restaurant, and finally the brothel. I even sent people out to lure in refugees from other places, and our population grew to tens of thousands. Sure, most of what I did wasn't exactly legal, but Tuyuan became something close to paradise. Honestly, I stopped wanting the court to notice me a long time ago. I used to dream about getting promoted, but now? I just wanted to stay here as my own little king. I had food, women, a nice house. What more could a man ask for? A year ago, some inspection official came through and started yelling about how Tuyuan was a miracle. He wanted to report it all to the capital. I had to work hard to shut that down. Just as I was enjoying the good life, my man Zhang Biao came running in. He's not much to look at, wears an official's uniform with a knife at his hip, but he's loyal. Boss, some travelers spotted 10 miles out. Their carriage doesn't have our mark. Want me to grab them? I kicked him. Zhang Biao, you idiot. We're the government, not bandits. We can't keep kidnapping people off the road. We need to look professional now. What if we scare them away? He fell over dramatically and whined. But we always used to do it that way. The maids all laughed. Everyone in Tuyuan knows me by now. I bark loud, but I'm soft inside. Zhang Biao getting yelled at like that just means he's close to me. Still, he ruined my mood. And honestly, bringing in new merchants is the most important thing in the county. I couldn't ignore it. I got up, said goodbye to the brothel's owner, and reminded him, run your business clean. If I hear about anyone hurting the girls or breaking the law, I'll tear this place down myself. The owner nodded nervously and thanked me over and over. Let's go, Zhang Biao. Back to the office. What I didn't know was that at that very moment, just half a day's ride from Tuyuan, the emperor himself, Li Che, was sitting in a shabby carriage, bouncing along the broken road toward my county. He had snuck out of the palace for a secret tour of the countryside, with only his old servant, Gua Tianyang, beside him. They had never heard of Tuyuan. Gua Tianyang figured it was some tiny, worthless place deep in the mountains. The road was terrible. The carriage shook so badly that when it hit a big bump, Gua Tianyang flew up and smacked his head on the ceiling. The emperor decided to rest one night in Tuyuan before moving on. And that's when their driver pointed ahead, trembling, and said, "Sir, look, something was waiting for them up the road." While I was heading back to the office with Zhang Biao, I had no idea what was happening at the edge of my county. That emperor, Li Che, and his old servant Gua Tianyang were bouncing along the broken road when their carriage suddenly hit something hard and jolted. The driver pointed ahead, and they all stared. Right where the old road ended, my road began. I'd had it built smooth and flat, dark gray, with stone borders on both sides. Not a single bump. The thing practically shined in the sunlight. Behind them was nothing but dirt and rocks. Ahead was a perfect highway. Gua Tianyang couldn't believe his eyes. He kept looking back and forth, rubbing his face. The emperor climbed out to see for himself and went quiet. Green crops lined both sides of the road. The breeze was cool, and everything looked peaceful and orderly. He said something like, "A tiny county built a road like this? Now I have to see this place." Half an hour later, they started seeing people on the road, walking, riding donkeys, going about their business. Farmers working in the fields. The emperor nodded, impressed that such a small place could be so well managed. Then they saw my walls. All three of them. The emperor, Guotianyang, and the driver dropped their jaws at the same time. My county looked like a fortress. Tall, gray-white walls, over 10 meters high, with big gold letters reading, Tuyuan County, above the gate. The emperor lost it. He grabbed Guotianyang and hissed, "What is your secret police even for? There's a fortified city 100 miles from the capital, and nobody told me." Poor Guotianyang hit the ground kowtowing. He'd never heard of the place either. Who would think to check some backwater mountain town? But the emperor calmed down eventually. He'd known Guotianyang since he was a boy, so he couldn't stay too angry. "Get up. I'll deal with you later." They walked to the gate, where 3 of my guards stopped them. "Papers, please." Guotianyang handed over their travel documents. My guard looked them over and asked, "What brings you to Tuyuan?" "Trade. My master deals in porcelain." The second my guard heard, "Trade," his face lit up. He whispered to another guard, who ran off into the city. I trained them well. Any merchant coming through was a big deal, and the office needed to know right away. The emperor, playing his merchant role, asked casually, "Those walls must have cost a fortune. Did the magistrate raise taxes for them?" One of my guards behind the first one burst out laughing. He asked. "I told you. Pay up." The first guard sighed, pulled out 10 copper coins, and handed them over. Apparently, they had a running bet on whether visitors would ask about the walls. Then he explained, "Those walls? They're fake. It's just a dirt wall with stone slabs glued to the outside. The patterns are carved on." Our magistrate thought the old mud wall was ugly, so he came up with this trick. Didn't cost much at all. The emperor laughed out loud. He was so entertained, he told Guotianyang to tip the guards a whole silver tael. But my guard's face turned hard immediately. "What are you doing? Put that away. We don't take money in Tuyuan." Guotianyang froze with his hand out, not knowing what to do. Where in the world do guards refuse silver? The emperor got quiet and thoughtful. Even the lowest officers here had this kind of discipline. My county was getting more interesting to him by the minute. They walked through the gate, and once inside, they went silent again. Stone-paved streets stretched out in every direction, clean as anything. Buildings lined both sides. People filled the streets, and vendors called out from their stalls. Everything looked new and well-kept. Guotianyang almost slipped and called him, "Your Majesty," before catching himself. "Master, they pave their streets with stone. Even the capital doesn't have this." The emperor nodded seriously. He was right. Back in the capital, most roads outside the inner city were still dirt. When it rained, everything turned to mud. But here in my little Tuyuan, the stone streets went on as far as you could see. And the people, that's what really got him. Everyone looked healthy, well-fed, with color in their cheeks. He even noticed quite a few fat people walking around. In the capital, you didn't see people looking this good. The emperor's questions were piling up. Who was this magistrate? How did he do all of this? And why had nobody ever heard of him? Of course, I had no idea any of this was happening. I was just walking back to my office, thinking about how to impress whatever merchant had shown up on my road. While I was busy back at the office, the emperor and Guotianyang were exploring my town. They wandered the streets for a while, taking in the sights. The emperor was impressed. He kept thinking that if every county in the empire looked like mine, he'd have nothing to worry about. Then Guotianyang spotted one of my inns. I'd named it, "There's an Inn." I thought it was funny. It even had a little official seal on the sign because it was government-run. That's right, I run the inns myself. Most of the big businesses in Tuyuan are owned by the county office. Why let private people take all the profit? The innkeeper welcomed them and gave them the prices. 5 taels for first class, 3 for second, 1 for third. Guotianyang nearly had a fit. 5 taels a night? Are you robbing outsiders? The innkeeper waved his hands and explained that these were standard prices, and being government-run, they were actually 20% cheaper than private places. He even bragged that during the busy trading season, you can't get a room at any price. The emperor just said, "Give us the first class," and that was that. Upstairs, a servant brought them tea and poured 2 cups. "Try our Tuyuan water. It's famous for being sweet." He showed them the red rope by the door. "Pull this if you need anything." I'd installed a rope pull system in the inn so guests didn't have to yell. Simple but clever, if I say so myself. The emperor tasted the tea and liked it. Light golden color, clear to the bottom, with a clean fragrance unlike anything in the capital. Guotianyang said it had a hint of herbal sweetness and was far better than what they drank back in the palace. Then Guo noticed the walls were covered in white linen cloth. That was my idea too. Paste cheap hemp fabric on the walls, and suddenly everything looks clean and bright. But then things got really entertaining. Guo wandered into the side room and screamed, "Your Majesty, there's a well inside the room." The emperor rushed over. There was Guo leaning over my porcelain toilet, staring at the water inside like he'd found buried treasure. He knocked on it and said, "It's made of porcelain. Something this big must have been incredibly hard to fire. Using it as a well seems wasteful. And why is the opening so small?" Then, and I almost choked when I heard this story later, the old man scooped up a handful of water from the toilet bowl and drank it. Delicious. So fresh and sweet. "Your Majesty, you must try some." He ran to the door, pulled the rope, and called up the servant. He dragged the poor boy to the toilet and pointed at it proudly. "How did you get a well up to the second floor?" The servant didn't even blink. He'd clearly been through this before. "Sir, that's not a well. That's a toilet." Guo froze like he'd been struck by lightning. He slowly turned to look at the emperor. The emperor stared back at him with murder in his eyes. Guo face went completely red. "Why would you put a toilet inside the room? Who keeps a privy indoors?" The emperor's expression was something else. He was very grateful he hadn't taken a drink himself. The dignity of the throne had been narrowly saved. The servant patiently explained that many of the newer inns in Tuyuan had indoor toilets. "See this rope connected to the water tank? After you're done, you pull it and the water washes everything away." Guo asked where the water tank was. The servant told him it was hidden in the ceiling, connected to the big water towers they'd seen standing next to buildings throughout town. Every morning, workers refilled them. The emperor remembered noticing those tall wooden structures with barrels on top. Now he understood what they were for. Meanwhile, the wave of nausea finally hit Guo. He leaned over the toilet and threw up. The servant got excited. "Yes, that's right. Lots of people do that after drinking too much." Guo finished, stood up, and glared at the boy. The servant cheerfully reached over, pulled the rope, and a rush of water swept everything clean. Even the smell vanished instantly. The emperor watched the whole thing with wide eyes. He had to admit, it was brilliant. Then he asked, "So where does all the waste go?" Meanwhile, that servant at my inn was still giving the emperor a full tour of my bathroom. He explained that all the waste flows through pipes down to a collection pit outside the county walls. Since Tuyuan sits on high ground, gravity does most of the work. For houses without flush toilets, I hired waste collectors to carry everything out to the pit. Guo, sharp old man, asked the obvious question. Wouldn't the pipes get clogged? The servant said the pit wasn't actually that big and sat near a river downstream. We'd built a special water wheel that uses the current's force to move the waste somewhere else. "Move it where?" they asked. "The next county over." "Yeah, that was my idea. Look, I'm not heartless. I just have priorities." My servant proudly explained my reasoning. Waste sitting underground too long makes the water taste bitter. Tuyuan's water is famously sweet and clean. People from neighboring counties even come here to buy our water. Can't ruin that, right? The servant also mentioned, a bit too enthusiastically, that I'd been thinking about connecting our pipes to the capital's moat. The capital has so many people, after all. The only reason it hadn't happened yet was the distance and the terrain. The water wheels weren't strong enough to push it that far. The emperor and Guo apparently looked ready to kill someone when they heard that. I can't imagine why. Then the servant showed them the toilet paper. "That's right, no wooden scraping sticks in my county. I banned those filthy things years ago. Every inn and public toilet uses proper paper." He pulled out a stack of white sheets from a hidden compartment next to the toilet. Both of them nearly fainted. "You wipe with paper?" The servant actually apologized, said the inn's paper was a bit stiff, and that the paper we use at the county office was as soft as a face towel. He was embarrassed about the quality. I've set high standards around here. He also showed them my salt water bidet, a little wooden water gun connected to its own tank. One press of the handle, and it shoots a stream of salt water. I always say salt water cleans better. Every inn in the county has one. The emperor grabbed his forehead like he was dizzy. Salt water to wash your backside. He probably thought that was the most extravagant thing he'd ever heard. Then the servant warned them about Zhang Biao. He told them that when I first introduced toilet paper, a lot of people refused to stop using the old wooden sticks. So Zhang Biao, being Zhang Biao, started threatening to so shut the backsides of anyone he caught using sticks. The servant said to stay away from him. Ugly guy, birthmark on his forehead, incredibly strong, not quite right in the head. Both the emperor and Guotianyang clenched up at that story. After the servant left, the emperor noticed the mirror I'd placed in every first-class room. He stared at his own reflection, saw the wrinkles, the gray at his temples, and muttered, "Am I getting old? Why is everything here something I've never seen before?" Guotianyang, meanwhile, dove at the toilet paper like a wild dog. He grabbed the whole stack and started rubbing it between his fingers. "Your Majesty, this is good paper. You could write on this." The emperor decided he'd rest for the night and find the local magistrate tomorrow. He wanted to see what kind of person could turn a tiny county into something like this. That person, of course, was me. And at that exact moment, I was lying in my chair at the back of the county office, getting a massage from Xiao Tao, my adopted daughter. I'd found her as an orphan 6 years ago and raised her myself. She was 16 now, pretty and sharp-tongued. "Your massage is terrible compared to the girls at Snow Moon House," I told her, chewing on dried fruit. "Too light," she shoved me hard. "Then go to Snow Moon House." "Fine, I will." I started to get up. She pushed me back down and squeezed my shoulders so hard it hurt. "That's the right pressure. Keep it there." She was grinding her teeth when Zhang Biao walked in. "Boss, the boys say those 2 new merchants who came in today deal in porcelain. Want me to bring them in?" I shook my head. "What's the rush? You think we're still bandits? They'll come to us on their own when they're ready. Things are different now. We've got real businesses starting up. We need to look professional. If we keep strong-arming people and word gets out, some angry merchant could report us. With my track record, I'd end up dragged before the imperial court." "Zhang Biao, are you trying to get rid of me?" Zhang Biao grinned his ugly grin. "Don't worry, boss. Nobody's taking you anywhere. As long as I'm here, you'll die right here in Tuyuan." That was his idea of being reassuring. The next morning, the emperor woke up at my inn and stretched. He told Guotianyang the bed was more comfortable than the one in his palace. Guotianyang had checked. There were 12 layers of padding underneath. I don't do things halfway. Even the breakfast impressed him. Just simple rice porridge and pickled vegetables, but he said it tasted better than palace food. He laughed to himself, saying a tiny 7th-rank magistrate was living better than the emperor. Guotianyang tried to stir up trouble. "This county is wasteful and extravagant, Your Majesty. This magistrate needs to be disciplined." The emperor shut him down cold. "Where do you think the money comes from? It falls from the sky? This is a remote backwater, and the people are living well. If every county in the empire were this extravagant, I'd be the happiest man alive." "You're getting dumber with age." Guotianyang shrank back like a scared quail. They went out walking. The emperor studied every detail. Clean streets, no beggars, no thugs, no drifters. The people didn't even look like poor villagers. He thought if you put them in different clothes, they could pass for scholars. Then they heard singing. "You love me. I love you. To you and milk tea, oh so sweet." Over and over. It was a tea vendor I'd set up, with a catchy jingle. A plain-looking middle-aged man was singing it at his stall while a crowd gathered around. That jingle was my creation. I borrowed it from a memory of my old world. Guotianyang looked disgusted and called it vulgar nonsense. Then he spat on the ground. "Bad move." Out of nowhere, an old lady wearing a red armband that said, "Sanitation Officer," appeared and blocked their path. She stuck out her hand, fingers spread wide, and shrieked, spitting on the ground. 5 copper fine." Guotianyang was outraged. He spat freely in the imperial palace, and nobody said a word. "Who are you? On what authority?" The old lady didn't flinch. "You're outsiders, aren't you? No spitting in this county. 5 coppers. Our magistrate made the rule himself. Don't like it? Come with me to see the judge." Guotianyang was about to explode, but the emperor's voice came through ice cold. "Pay her." Guotianyang paid. The emperor then stopped the old woman to ask some questions. "Why are there no beggars here?" She laughed. "Looking for beggars? We don't have any. Our magistrate is a kind man. He can't stand seeing poor people. He rounded them all up and put them to work digging ditches." The emperor nearly choked. Guotianyang hissed, "Master, this magistrate is scum. An absolute disgrace to public office." The old lady heard that and exploded. "Watch your mouth. Nobody in Tuyuan talks bad about our magistrate. If you weren't outsiders, you'd already be getting punched." Tianyang argued back. What kind of man drags beggars off to dig trenches? But before the old lady could finish her answer, someone down the street shouted, "Lawsuit at the courthouse. Come watch." The old lady forgot all about them and took off running. The emperor followed, curious. When they reached my courthouse, they froze again. My county office is massive. The plaza out front alone is over 20 acres. There's a stone arch at the entrance that reads, "Tuyuan County Office," then a wide stone paved square, then broad stairs leading up to the building. 3 stories tall, gray-white stone, cold and imposing. Standing at the bottom of the steps, you can't help but feel small. Guo Tianyang's jaw dropped. There's an old saying that officials never rebuild their offices because it's a waste. How much did this cost? The emperor said nothing. He just stared at the arch for a long moment, then walked in. Inside, the main hall looked more normal. Same layout as any county court, just bigger. A huge plaque hung overhead reading, "The mirror hangs high and bright." People crowded behind the barriers. A plaintiff stood in the middle, a defendant knelt beside him, and my guards lined both sides holding their staffs. Everyone was waiting for me. And where was I? In the back, arms raised while Xiao Tao wrestled my official robes onto me. Are you kidding me? It's not even past noon, and some troublemaker wants to file a complaint? Can a man sleep? I've had 2 months of peace, and now this. Xiao Tao said nothing, just kept adjusting the robe. It had collected dust from sitting in the closet so long. What are we eating when I get back? I haven't even had breakfast. I'm starving. Beef, she said. Beef again? Nothing more interesting? I'm sick of it. She rolled her eyes. You're done. Go. I looked myself over, gave my sleeves a dramatic flick, and headed out. Let's go. Court is in session. I walked into the courtroom and sat behind my desk. Some guy named Zhang Laolu was kneeling on the floor, crying his eyes out. The more people gathered to watch, the harder he cried. Real performer, this one. He started wailing. Your Honor, I've been wronged. I want to file a complaint against the county. He hadn't even finished his sentence, and I was already furious. Against the county? Against me? I leave you people alone for a few days, and now you're climbing on top of me? I slammed my gavel. Who dares accuse this court? The crowd burst out laughing. I slammed it 3 more times. Order. Order. Anyone who makes noise gets dragged in here for 10 hits. Dead silence. Parents covered their children's mouths. I didn't notice at the time, but the emperor was standing in the crowd watching me. Apparently, he thought I looked like a terrible official, slouching, half asleep, no dignity whatsoever. He couldn't understand how someone like me had so much authority. Zhang Laolu stammered out that he wasn't suing me. He was suing one of my constables, a man named Lu Fa. Lu Fa had eaten at Zhang Laolu's restaurant multiple times without paying, smashed 2 jars of good wine, and owed 17 taels and 2 coins. The mediator had tried several times, but Lu Fa kept dodging. I turned to Lu Fa, who was standing right there. I knew him, of course. Lu Fa, did you refuse to pay? He dropped to his knees immediately and confessed. He said he was broke. He'd been drinking because he was in a bad mood. And on top of everything, he owed the gambling house 10 more taels. That made me really angry. I told all my officers, no gambling, no bothering civilians. He'd ignored every word. 20 strikes. Before my guards even moved, Lu Fa bit down on his shirt, pulled it up, and lay flat on the ground on his own. No resistance. No arguing. 20 heavy strikes later, his backside was a bloody mess. He whispered, I know I was wrong, sir. The emperor was apparently shocked at this. He'd never seen a defendant just accept punishment like that, without a single complaint. And Guo Tianyang thought even his own grandchildren weren't this obedient. I told Lu Fa his pay would be cut in half this month, and he'd sweep the streets for 3 months before coming back to work. If it happened again, he'd be kicked out of Tuyuan for good. Lu Fa actually smiled through the pain. Thank you for your mercy, sir. Get him to the clinic. Then Zhang Laolu nervously piped up. Sir, what about my money? I spread my hands. You saw it yourself. He's broke. Zhang Laolu's face crumbled. He'd made an enemy and lost his money. Worst day of his life. I sighed. But I can't let a good man suffer for nothing. What's your restaurant called? Old Six Restaurant. Fine. I'll come eat there tonight. Consider it my personal endorsement. Court dismissed. Zhang Laolu was overjoyed. He banged his forehead on the floor 3 times thanking me and ran out of the building. As I was leaving, I glanced at 2 unfamiliar faces in the crowd. the Emperor and Guotianyang, though of course I didn't know who they were. I know pretty much everyone in Tiyuan by now, and these two were obviously the new merchants who'd arrived yesterday. The Emperor and Guotianyang stood there completely confused. They couldn't make sense of what had just happened. No proper legal procedure, no formal sentencing, the whole thing was bizarre to them. Guotianyang said everything about this place felt strange and suggested they just go talk to me directly. But the Emperor wanted to keep watching. He remembered I'd said I was going to Old Six restaurant that evening, so he decided they'd go too. They wandered around town all afternoon. The Emperor was so afraid of forgetting things that he had Guotianyang take out paper and pen to write everything down. By evening they found the restaurant in the north part of town. They weren't hard to beat there. Zhang Laolu had already hung an enormous red banner across the second floor. "Welcome, Honorable Magistrate, to sample our new dish, stewed chicken with angelica root." The Emperor figured it out immediately. My visit wasn't really about drinking. I was driving customers to Zhang Laolu's place. The banner alone had already drawn a bigger crowd than any other restaurant on the street. Guotianyang started whispering in the Emperor's ear again. "This is improper. An official mingling with merchants. It's unseemly." The Emperor had mixed feelings about it too, but he went inside anyway. They sat upstairs near the stairs, ordered some food, and waited. Before long, I came strolling up the stairs with Zhang Biao, Xiao Tao, and some of my people around me. I spotted the two strangers sitting by the stairway, those same new merchants, but didn't think much of it. I walked past them and sat down at the center table. Zhang Laolu rushed over. "Everything's ready for you, sir. Shall I bring it out now?" I waved at Zhang Laolu. "Bring the food. But that banner comes down after 3 days, understood?" He nodded eagerly. "Of course, sir. One more thing. Clear everyone off this floor. I don't like eating with a crowd." I gave Zhang Biao a look. He knew exactly what to do. He ran to the stairway and bellowed, "Tonight's bill for everyone downstairs is on Master Fong." The second floor emptied out fast, and the people downstairs cheered like it was a festival. Zhang Laolu was grinning ear to ear. Having me visit was already paying off big. But as the floor cleared, 2 people stayed seated. Those same 2 strangers, the merchant, Li Long, and his accountant, Guo De. Zhang Laolu politely asked them to go downstairs where the free meal was. The accountant snapped at him in a high-pitched voice. "We can afford our own food. We don't need charity." Zhang Laolu tried offering a free jar of wine on top of it. Nothing. The older man just sat there calmly sipping tea while the other one told Zhang Laolu to get lost. Zhang Laolu looked at me helplessly. I studied the two of them. Something about the older man was interesting. He had a quiet confidence that didn't match a regular merchant. "If you'd rather stay, why not join me for dinner?" I offered. The older one smiled, gave me a polite bow, and walked over without hesitation. His servant hurried after him. We sat down, and I asked where they were from. The older one introduced himself as Li Long, a porcelain dealer from the capital, and called his companion Guo De, his accountant. They said they were headed to Hengjiang Prefecture but had detoured through Tuan because of a landslide on the main road. I got a little suspicious. The route didn't quite add up, but I let it go. Then I asked when they were leaving. "We're not. Everything here is so unusual. If we brought some of these products back to the capital, the profits would be enormous. Would the magistrate be open to that?" Music to my ears. "My county welcomes nothing more than merchants." I immediately started my sales pitch. I told them about our porcelain toilets, huge, complex pieces that would impress anyone. I mentioned custom orders, trade contracts at the county office, the whole deal. Then Li Long said something that set me off. He tasted his tea and remarked casually, "This is wonderful. I doubt even the emperor in his palace gets tea this good." I slammed the table and jumped to my feet. "How dare you? Watch your words, sir. How can you slander the emperor like that? Everything under heaven belongs to his majesty. You're telling me the emperor can't drink a simple cup of tea?" I launched into a full speech. I talked about how the emperor personally led armies into battle, how he endured hardship to unify the land, how he works tirelessly on the throne for the sake of the people. Without the emperor, there would be no Tiyuan. Without Tiyuan, there would be no tea. And yet the capital doesn't have this tea? The thought breaks my heart. I wish I could fly there and brew a pot for His Majesty myself. If even the emperor cannot drink this tea, how dare I? I poured my tea on the ground dramatically. "Long live the emperor." Behind me, Xiao Tao rolled her eyes. She remembered I'd pulled the exact same routine years ago with merchants from the Qian kingdom, just with a different emperor's name. I always told her it was smart planning. Get the patriotic reputation established early. If anyone ever drags me to the capital someday, at least I'll have that shield ready. Li Long froze with his teacup in midair, not sure whether to drink or put it down. Guoda looked around the room in total confusion. Then he quietly mumbled, "Long live the emperor." I turned on him immediately. Mr. Gua, loving the emperor shouldn't just be words. It must come from the heart, like mine. How many officials praise his majesty to his face while betraying him behind his back? Such people are no better than animals. Guoda's face went dark. He looked at Li Long with an expression like a kicked puppy. The magistrate is absolutely right. That's exactly how I feel too. I noticed Li Long's face had turned slightly red. Couldn't tell if he was embarrassed or amused. Then I smoothly pivoted back to business. Speaking of tea, our Tuyuan tea masters developed a special roasting technique. The flavor is one of a kind. If you took this to the capital, the nobles would fight over it. And then the emperor himself could finally taste it. So, are you too interested? Guoda's face twitched. He'd figured out that my entire patriotic performance was just a setup to sell tea. How much? Li Long asked. 10 taels of silver per 1 liang of tea. Guoda nearly jumped out of his seat. In the capital, you could buy a whole gene of ordinary tea for 1 tael. Even premium tea cost around 10 taels. And this was just regular Tuyuan tea. It was everywhere here. That's a bit expensive, isn't it? He said. I didn't blink. Expensive? The emperor himself has never tasted this tea. And you think 10 taels is too much? They had nothing to say to that. Seeing them speechless about the tea price, I decided to teach these two a lesson in business. Let me explain how selling works. You buy at 100 taels per gene, then sell it in the capital for 200. Doesn't matter if nobody buys it first. You're building a brand. I laid out the whole strategy. Tell customers the tea grows in prime golden soil with 8 hours of sunlight per day. Every acre has a dedicated caretaker. There are natural hot springs nearby, gold deposits underground, and the tea is picked by beautiful maidens who recite poetry as they pluck each leaf with their tongues. Package it in fancy porcelain boxes, half a liang per box. Call it little box tea. Then tell people only true nobility can drink this. If you don't have it, you're nobody. You want to stay in the elite circle? You drink this tea. That's what being noble means. You don't buy what's best, you buy what's most expensive. Our Tuyuan motto. Not the best, but the most expensive. Guoda covered his face in shame. Li Long went quiet. I could tell I'd opened their eyes to modern marketing. 2 more lost sheep enlightened. Good deed points +2. Then the food arrived. Zhang Laolu personally carried up the chicken soup. White, rich, slow-cooked until the meat was falling apart. I served Li Long first, a bowl of soup and a fat drumstick. Then I gave myself the same. For Guoda, a bowl of soup and a piece of chicken breast. Guoda stared at me with wounded eyes. Look, I could tell who the boss was between these two. The servant talks too much and has an attitude. Be grateful you got meat at all. I kept pushing the tea deal. Porcelain is nice, but it's nothing unique. Tea has better margins, it's light, easy to transport, and nothing breaks on the road. Li Long asked what the tea was called. I hadn't actually thought of a name yet. We'd only started roasting tea recently. I paused for a moment, then put on my most dignified face. This tea strengthens the kidneys, boosts vitality, and extends life. It's called Grand Heavenly Immortal Tea. Yes, that's the one. Guoda's face turned red. He definitely knew I'd made that up on the spot. Li Long said they only had about 2,000 taels with them. That was plenty for a first order. I told him to take whatever he wanted and come back for more anytime. Then I poured them some of my peach blossom fan wine. Li Long took 1 sip and his expression changed instantly. Peach blossom fan, that's right. It's the backbone of Tuyuan's economy. Everything you see here was built on that wine. Then Li Long's face turned serious. I heard this wine belongs to the Prince of Wu. Is the prince behind Tuyuan County? I shook my head firmly. No. The wine has always been Tuyuan's. The Prince of Wu just has an exclusive sales contract with us. Years ago, someone from his household stumbled on our wine, and we made a deal. He's made a fortune reselling it. Honestly, partnering with the Prince of Wu was one of my bigger regrets. Back when the county was broke, I needed someone powerful to attach myself to. But the prince turned out to be useless. No ambition, no business sense. The wine sells itself on reputation and quality. His people never lifted a finger to promote it. And I was stuck in an exclusive deal. That's exactly why I wasn't making the same mistake with tea. No exclusivity this time. I needed as many sellers as possible. The wider my network, the safer my position. I didn't care who this Li Long really worked for. As long as he wasn't connected to the Prince of Wu or the Emperor, we could do business. Li Long seemed relieved to hear the prince was just a middleman. Then he asked to visit the tea plantation. I smiled and said, "Trade secret. Can't show you." "Visit the plantation? What plantation?" "There is no plantation. I buy cheap raw tea from Hengjiang Prefecture, 4 jin for 1 coin. Toss in some affordable herbs, roast it all together, and that's it. People think it tastes special because they've only ever had the old-style boiled tea soup. First time trying roasted leaf tea and they think it's magic. Nobody needed to know that." Li Long didn't push it. He raised his glass. "Fine. I'll buy a first batch and test the market in the capital. I look forward to working together, Magistrate Fong." "My pleasure." Over dinner, I kept teaching those two about business, hunger marketing, brand building, that kind of thing. They looked a bit confused but seemed to enjoy themselves. All in all, a good evening. Then Zhang Laolu came over with the bill. 506 taels. "I'll round it down to 500 for you, sir." Everyone at the table went silent. 500 taels? For one dinner? I laughed in disbelief. "Zhang Laolu, you've got guts trying to rob me." He dropped to his knees sweating. "Please let me explain." Some kids from downstairs ran out into the street yelling that the food was free tonight. Dozens of people showed up. We had to set up tables in the road, and they're still coming. I ran out of ingredients and had to borrow from the restaurant next door. I couldn't help laughing. The people of Tuyuan are getting craftier by the day. Even so, 500 for a few dozen people, Zhang Laolu wailed. They ordered the good wine. Then they got drunk and demanded watermelons. We had to go buy over a dozen at 10 taels each. My ears perked up. "The watermelons are ready?" "In early spring." "Yes, from the greenhouses." "Are they ripe?" "They're ripe." Li Long and Guoda looked baffled. "Where do you get watermelons this time of year?" I grumbled about the price, but told Zhang Biao to pay up. He stepped forward, flicked his sleeve, and slammed a bag of silver onto the table. "Count it." 500 exactly. Li Long's eyes nearly popped out. 500 taels of silver. "In your sleeve?" Zhang Biao shrugged. "Sure. The boss always brings 1,000 when he goes out. I've still got 500 in the other one." He lifted his right sleeve, and something heavy sagged inside it. Li Long swallowed hard. I could see him calculating. Carrying that weight in your sleeves meant you could swing a 100-gene weapon in battle. He was right. Zhang Biao is a monster. I introduced him properly. "This is Zhang Biao, courtesy name Hai Wang. The only constable and greatest fighter in the county. People call him the Star of Tuyuan. He can throw a grown man like a sandbag. If you ever run into trouble, find him." Li Long bowed respectfully. "Impressive. Truly impressive." Zhang Biao puffed his chest out like a rooster. I told the two merchants that if they wanted to finalize anything, they could come to the county office tomorrow and sign a contract with me. Then I headed home. What I didn't know was that back at the inn, those two were having a very different conversation. Li Long, the emperor, sat at his table deep in thought, candlelight flickering across his face. After a long silence, he said, "Prepare the bank notes. Tomorrow we sign the contract." I'm more and more curious about this Magistrate Fong. Guo Tianyang asked if they were still going to Hengjiang Prefecture. "No. We've already gained more here than expected. We've been away too long. The crown prince is running the court, and the ministers must be getting anxious." The emperor sighed. "He can't be more than his early 20s, and he's built all of this. When I think of my own son, it gives me a headache. He doesn't come close." Guo Tianyang tried one more time. "Your Majesty, this Fang Jingyi is unconventional, sure, but an official running businesses himself. Isn't that improper? Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. What he's accomplished here would put every official in the empire to shame. In just 2 or 3 days, I've seen more innovation than I've encountered in years." "Greenhouses? What even are those?" Guo Tianyang huffed. "I still say it's just cheap tricks. Dumping sewage on the neighbor's county. Scamming nobles into overpaying for ordinary tea. And that shameless flattery at dinner. All to sell tea leaves." The emperor cut him off. "Enough. If cheap tricks can make the people prosperous, then let there be cheap tricks. If you had a third of his ability, I wouldn't have so many headaches. When we get back, look into Feng Jingyi's background, and find out why the inspection officials never reported anything about Tuyuan, Gu Tianyang pouted. He'd been running around, eating toilet water, getting fined for spitting, fed chicken breast instead of drumstick, and all he got in return was criticism. Your Majesty is wise, he muttered. Now you're just copying him. Xiao Tao woke me up at noon. Those two merchants from the capital were already waiting. I'd been sleeping terribly the last few days. What else is there to do in this place without any entertainment? I need at least 12 hours of sleep. Xiao Tao doesn't understand. She slapped a cold, wet towel on my face to wake me up. Not gentle at all. I got dressed and shuffled over to my special meeting room. I'd built it when I redesigned the courthouse. Tucked away in a quiet corner, no windows, soundproofed, lit by oil lamps all around. On the wall I'd carved a poem I remembered from my old world. Fierce browed, I coolly face 1,000 pointing fingers. Head bowed, I gladly serve as children's willing ox. Good stuff. When I walked in, Li Long was standing there staring at the poem. Did you write this, magistrate? No. Found it in some old manuscript fragment. Liked it, so I carved it on the wall. I'm a man of dignity. I don't claim other people's poetry. Li Long sighed about not being able to see the full poem. Then we got down to business. Guida laid out the banknotes. I had everything ready. Zhang Biao unstrapped a bundle from his back with 20 tea bricks, 1 jean each. I also gave them an iron medallion with our peach blossom seal. Hang this on your carriage next time. You'll pass through Tuyuan with no trouble, and someone will come find you. No need to meet me personally. Then I handed over 2 documents. One was the trade contract, straightforward, matching what we'd discussed at dinner. The other was my confidentiality agreement. Li Long read through both carefully. The contract was fine. The confidentiality agreement, not so much. Why can't we mention Tuyuan County to anyone? I smiled. It's just temporary. We're a small county with limited resources. Our products are popular, but we can't produce enough. If word gets out, we'll be overwhelmed. Besides, this protects your interests too. Right now you have exclusive tea sales. Also, too many outsiders could corrupt my innocent townspeople. Then he got to the penalty clause. It says here that anyone who breaks the agreement will suffer mouth sores, weak limbs, cold sweats, dizziness, and death by drowning in the collective spit of Tuyuan citizens. And what does final interpretation rights belong to Tuyuan County mean? Exactly what it says. Li Long wiped sweat from his forehead. But he bit the bullet and pressed his thumbprint onto it anyway. He was using a fake name, so I suppose he figured it didn't matter. Guido watched the whole thing with a pained grimace, though I caught a glimmer of grudging respect in his eyes. After the thumbprint, I told them there was one more step. Please read the agreement out loud into this horn. I pointed to my special device, a big horn connected to a needle, mounted over a copper cylinder with a crank handle. I'd built a crude sound recorder. It's a local custom, I explained. Speaking into this device proves the sincerity of the partnership. Just a little ceremony. Li Long looked confused but went along with it. I counted to 3, he started reading, and Zhang Biao cranked the handle. The needle scratched tiny dots across a sheet of silver foil as they spoke. When they finished, Zhang Biao peeled off the foil and walked out. Li Long's eyes followed it. He was dying to know what it was, but I didn't give him the chance. Business was done, so I showed them the door. A minute later, they were standing outside the courthouse, staring at each other in bewildered silence. Then a carriage pulled up behind them. The driver called out cheerfully, "Are you the gentleman heading back to the capital? The magistrate sent me to take you." Li Long was touched. He thought it was a nice gesture. Guida looked relieved too. Having transport arranged saved them a lot of trouble. They climbed in, got comfortable. Then the driver poked his head through the curtain with a big smile. "That'll be 10 taels, sirs." After I sent those 2 merchants off with the carriage, I went back to my usual routine. I had no idea what kind of trip they were in for. It started raining the moment they left Tuyuan. And once they crossed out of my county's borders, the nice road ended and the mud began. Their carriage got stuck in potholes over and over. Guida had to climb out and push with the driver, soaking wet and miserable. When they finally reached the outskirts of the capital, things got even worse. The roads were jammed with carts and people. Everything was chaos. The carriage couldn't move. The driver kept yelling at people ahead while Li Long, the emperor, sat inside getting angrier by the minute. Then the carriage hit another pit, and the driver fell off, landing half buried in mud. A crowd of ragged loafers stood around laughing at him. The driver cursed and shouted, "This rotten place. I should have stayed in the county." He'd hurt himself in the fall and couldn't get up. Gwida had to crawl out and drag him back onto the carriage. The emperor finally said, "Forget the carriage. We walk." Gwida protested. It was still raining. But the emperor pointed at the road. Walking would actually be faster than sitting in the stuck carriage. He paid the driver 20 taels and sent him home. As Gwida watched the carriage disappear, he suddenly missed my county terribly. My roads, my clean streets, my stone pavements. Meanwhile, here in the capital, the center of the entire empire, sewage ran through the streets. People dumped garbage and waste right outside their doors, and children splashed around in filthy puddles. The air stank. The emperor stared at the inner city walls in the distance and sighed deeply. I thought that after unifying the country, simply lowering taxes and being kind would make people's lives better on its own. I was naive. A tiny county magistrate has done more than I have. How pathetic. They walked for another quarter hour in the rain before reaching the inner city. The emperor was soaked head to toe, boots caked in mud. Gwida was gasping for air behind him, carrying 20 jean of my tea on his back. The emperor had spent years in the army and walked fast. Poor Gwida could barely keep up. Once inside the inner city, Gwida found an intelligence outpost and arranged a proper carriage for the rest of the way to the palace. Back at the palace, the emperor went straight to his study. The ministers had been in a panic since he'd left. He'd just dropped a letter and vanished. The crown prince was supposed to run things, but he hadn't shown up to court once. Not a single day. The three senior ministers, Chief Minister Li Yensong and Grand Secretaries Zheng Qiao and Zhang Dongxiang, rushed to the imperial study. They found the emperor already buried in a mountain of unread reports, writing responses one by one. Li Yensong tried to scold him gently for leaving without warning. The emperor didn't look up. "I just wanted to take a walk. Now tell me, look at these reports. What exactly has the crown prince been doing while I was gone? What have all of you been doing?" The ministers went pale. Zheng Qiao admitted quietly that the crown prince hadn't attended court at all. Zhang Dongxiang, a man with a short temper, couldn't hold back. He said the prince had claimed to be sick every single day. Headaches, sore feet, mysterious ailments the doctors couldn't find. Meanwhile, he'd built himself a new animal fighting arena and spent his time watching beasts battle while supposedly recovering. Zhang Dongxiang got more and more worked up, rattling off complaints while the other two ministers sweated beside him, unable to stop him. The emperor's face grew darker with every word. And me? I was back in Tuyuan, probably napping. I had no idea I'd just entertained the most powerful man in the empire, or that he was now comparing his own son to me and finding the prince severely lacking. I was probably sleeping soundly back in Tuyuan when all of this went down at the palace. I only heard the details much later. The emperor had stormed back to his study, and the three senior ministers told him everything. The crown prince, Li Yuanzhao, 15 years old, hadn't shown up to court even once while his father was gone. Not a single day. He claimed to be sick every time. Headaches, sore feet, mysterious pains that no doctor could find. Instead, he'd built himself something called the Tiger and Leopard Garden right there in the Eastern Palace. His idea of fun was watching tigers hunt down old horses. That's what the future ruler of the empire was doing while the country ran itself. The emperor sent the ministers away and went straight to the Eastern Palace. He found the prince sitting in a chair, happily watching a tiger tear apart two horses. His personal eunuch Lu Jin stood behind him, sweating and terrified, knowing this would all come crashing down eventually. The prince sighed dramatically. "Lu Jin, these old horses are too boring. We should get a second tiger. Two tigers fighting. Now that would be exciting." Lu Jin tried to warn him. "Your Highness, you haven't been to court in days. The ministers are upset. When your father returns, this won't look good." The prince waved it off. "So what? The world is at peace. The ministers can handle everything. I was born too late. I missed all the real battles. A true man should be on the battlefield, not pushing papers." Then he got emotional. "If I weren't the crown prince, I'd be the greatest general alive. But father already took all the glory. Why did he have to be born before me?" A single tear rolled down his cheek. He truly felt sorry for himself. What he didn't know was that the emperor was standing right behind him, listening to every word. Lu Jin had seen the emperor approach, but was too frozen with fear to say anything. He just backed up against the wall and watched the disaster unfold. The emperor placed his hand on the prince's shoulder and said softly, "If you love fighting so much, why not jump down there? That tiger looks like a fine opponent." The prince recognized the voice. His eyes went wide. He turned around slowly, forcing a smile onto his white face. Father, you're back. I've been waiting so long." The emperor smiled coldly. "I heard you've been ill for days. I came to check on you personally. You look remarkably healthy." The prince started stammering and sweating. "Come with me to the imperial garden," the emperor said calmly. "It's too cramped in here. I need more room. Bring your little eunuch too." He walked out. Lu Jin crawled over to the prince, shaking from head to toe. "Your Highness, I'm finished. My only wish is that you let them bury me in one piece." The prince kicked him. "You idiot. Why didn't you warn me he was coming? He was too fast. I couldn't. I can't even stand up anymore." The prince's face went white. He knew what was coming. "Get up. Quick. Bring me every padded jacket you can find. And get my equipment." He was going to need the padding. In the imperial garden, the emperor sat in a pavilion. In his left hand was a thick wooden staff. In his right, a long whip. He'd sent someone to the armory for the biggest, heaviest ones they had. He tested them out, smashed a stone railing with the staff, snapped a tree branch with the whip. Good. His strength hadn't faded. The old saying goes, "A filthy son needs a good beating." The emperor had given this boy the best teachers, the best environment, every advantage in the world. And the result was a lazy brat who played with animals all day. At 15, the emperor himself had been fighting in real battles, earning military honors. His son couldn't even compare to a small county magistrate's little toe. He thought of me, the nobody from Tuyuan who'd built everything from nothing while still in his 20s. Then he looked at what his own son had become. His eyes turned ice cold. The tiger was about to meet the prince. I was blissfully unaware back in Tuyuan while the emperor was dealing with his son. But I heard the full story eventually, and honestly, it was better than any theater show. The crown prince, Li Yuanzhao, 15 years old, crept into the imperial garden looking suspiciously fat. He'd stuffed himself with extra layers of clothing, padded jackets, and hidden iron plates under everything. The kid had done this before. He knew a beating was coming, and he came prepared. The emperor sat in the pavilion holding a thick staff in one hand and a long whip in the other. He said nothing for a long time, just stared at the prince with murderous eyes. The silence was so heavy that even the birds stopped singing. The only sound was Lu Jin, the eunuch, gasping for air on his knees. Finally, the emperor spoke, calmly, which was somehow worse than yelling. "You want to be a general? You said I stole your glory? Then let's fight right now." He tossed the heavy staff at the prince's feet. The prince started sweating. "Father, I'm no match for you. I'm still growing." The emperor's eyes narrowed. "You seem to be dressed warmly for someone who's sick. Strip him." The guards pulled off the prince's clothes layer by layer. Under the outer robe was a thick jacket. Under that, another jacket. Then another. 4 layers came off before they hit the white underclothes. Then an iron plate clattered to the ground. The emperor's jaw dropped. The pants too. Off came 2 layers of pants. An iron butt guard fell out. Then iron knee pads. Then iron shin guards. The ground looked like a blacksmith shop. The emperor exploded. "You worthless animal. Lazy. Sneaky. Useless. Are you trying to kill me with anger?" He shouted about everything he'd given the prince. The best food, the best clothes, the best teachers. He'd fought wars so his son wouldn't have to. He didn't need a brilliant emperor, just someone who could keep things running. But this boy couldn't even manage that. "You're not fit to be a ruler. You're not even fit to be a county magistrate." That was me he was comparing the prince to. I'd apparently become the emperor's measuring stick for competence. The prince, despite being terrified, suddenly got defiant. Teenage pride kicked in. "Father, I just haven't had the chance. If I'd been born a few years earlier, I would have conquered the Qin kingdom before you did. Don't compare me to some tiny county magistrate. I'm meant to be a commander." The emperor laughed with pure fury. "Hang him up." The guards tied the prince up and dangled him from the corner of the pavilion. The prince hung there, face red with humiliation, still yelling about being born in the wrong era. The emperor cracked the whip across his backside. The rebellion evaporated instantly. "Father, I'm still a child." "A child? At your age, I was killing enemies on the battlefield. You are no child of mine. I could do that too." Crack. 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 The emperor was an expert with that whip. Every single strike landed perfectly on the buttocks. The prince howled and screamed. But secretly, the prince was celebrating inside. He knew his father's pattern. Always the backside, never anywhere else. And he'd kept a second iron butt guard hidden under his clothes. The one that fell out earlier was a decoy. The whip stung a little through the metal, but it was bearable. So he put on a great performance, screaming like he was dying. After about 15 lashes, the emperor got tired. His anger cooled. Watching his son spinning and wailing, his heart softened. He tossed the whip aside and ordered the guards to keep the prince hanging until noon the next day. He turned to leave, and then the prince rotated just enough for the emperor to see a flash of metal through a rip in the seat of his pants. The fire came roaring back. Li Yuanzhao? Strip him completely. Not a single thread left. I will beat you to death today. The prince panicked for real this time. Father, I was wrong. I'll never do it again. Please, you're wrong? No, I'm wrong. I should never have fathered you. He picked up the whip again, ready to go all out. But right at that moment, Guo Tianyang came running into the garden. Your Majesty, the background check on Fang Jingyi is ready. The sound of my name stopped the emperor cold. He dropped the whip immediately, ordered the guards to dress the prince and keep him hanging, and walked away with Guo Tianyang. The prince let out a huge sigh of relief. Behind him, Lu Jin the eunuch, who'd been kneeling the entire time, finally collapsed flat on the ground. A puddle spread beneath him. And me? I have no idea why, but somehow my name had just saved the crown prince's bare backside. I found out later that after the emperor got back to the palace, Guo Tianyang delivered a full report on me. Turns out they dug up my background, or rather, the original owner of this body's background. Fang Jingyi passed the imperial exams at 15, third tier, parents both dead. Was supposed to get a decent posting near the capital, but mouthed off to a superior and got shipped out to Tuyuan as punishment right when the old magistrate died. According to the official records, Tuyuan still had only 2,000 people and paid almost no taxes. That's what I'd been reporting every year. I'd made sure of that. The emperor found it hilarious. He knew perfectly well my county had tens of thousands of people by now. Guo Tianyang asked what should be done about me. The emperor said there was no rush. He called me a young hero, a 15-year-old who passed the exams and then built up a worthless county in just 7 years. He said I had a strange personality and needed to be properly handled, but if used well, I could become a great minister someday. He even mentioned putting me near the crown prince. Then Guo Tianyang reminded him that the prince was still hanging in the garden. The emperor's mood soured instantly. Leave him hanging. That useless creature. Someone else passed the exams at 15, and he can't even read a book. Tear down his tiger garden and slaughter that stupid tiger. Then, and this is the part that really got me when I heard about it, the emperor decided to sell my tea himself. He ordered Guo Tianyang to set up a shop in the inner city, package the tea in fancy jars, and sell it exactly the way I'd taught him at dinner. Guo Tianyang nearly choked. The emperor of the entire nation, going into the tea business? That broke about 100 rules of imperial conduct. Your Majesty, if the ministers find out, the emperor waved him off. I bought the tea with my personal funds. I can do what I want with it. Then he got philosophical. He talked about how the empire had followed the same old systems for 200 years. If nothing changed, decline was inevitable. He said Tuin had inspired him. If a tiny county could transform itself, maybe the whole empire could too. He talked about the rich nobles hoarding silver in their houses and their tombs, never spending it on the people, never even building a decent road. It was time to shake things up. The emperor leaned back and said, "Tomorrow at morning court, brew a pot of that grand, heavenly, immortal tea. Make it strong. Let all the officials see it. Then, improvise. I want to see if that boy's sales methods actually work." He chuckled. Selling tea is a bit like commanding an army. Interesting. Guo Tianyang walked out wincing. The emperor was quoting me like scripture now. Everything I'd said at dinner, the branding, the pricing, the psychology of luxury, he'd absorbed it all. And now Guo Tianyang had to go execute it. The worst part? The emperor set the price at 50 taels per jar, 1 liang of tea per jar. That worked out to 500 taels per jean. I'd sold it to him at 10 taels per liang, 100 taels per jean. This man was marking it up 5 times what I charged him. He was even more ruthless than me. Guo Tianyang's face twitched, but he didn't dare say a word. 500 taels a jin for tea I'd bought from Hengjiang at 4 jin for a coin. If there's one thing I learned that day, it's that I should never try to out-hustle an emperor. As for Guitianyang, he was already doing the math on something else entirely. He figured I'd end up in the palace eventually. The emperor couldn't stop talking about me. He'd have to deal with me for years to come. And he was still bitter about the chicken breast. I had no idea my tea-selling lessons were already being put to work in the capital. Guitianyang moved fast. By that same afternoon, he'd set up a shop in the richest part of the city, got his hands on dozens of fancy porcelain jars, and hung up a sign. When you work for the emperor, things happen quickly. The next morning, before court started, Guitianyang carried a tray with a pot of my tea right through the crowd of officials waiting outside the hall. The lid was half open so the smell would drift out. He walked slowly, letting the aroma do its work. The chief minister, Li Yensong, stopped him. Guitianyang, where's the emperor? And what's that tea? That was exactly what the old eunuch was waiting for. He put on his best casual voice and said, "Oh, this? The emperor discovered it at a tea shop in the city a few days ago. It's fresh and light, boosts your energy, keeps you sharp." He liked it so much he replaced all his old tea with this. People started crowding around, sniffing. The fragrance was doing exactly what I'd told them it would, drawing people in. Someone asked the name. Guitianyang announced proudly, "It's called Grand Heavenly Immortal Tea. They say it extends your life, strengthens the kidneys, restores vitality. It's known as the treasure of men." The crowd burst out laughing. Someone shouted, "I didn't know eunuch Guo was an expert on the treasure of men." Guitianyang's face went purple. He wanted to find whoever said that and tear them apart. He blamed me for all of it, naturally. He played it cool, though. Said he had to hurry before the tea got cold, and the emperor got angry. Then he turned to leave, and Li Yensong grabbed his arm. The old chief minister was hooked. He was over 60, his back hurt, his legs ached. He couldn't stay awake during work. A tea that could fix all of that? He had to try it. "Where can I buy some?" Guitianyang smiled inside. The biggest fish in the pond, biting first. If the chief minister bought it, everyone below him would follow. "I'm not sure where the palace got it, but I can ask around for you," Guitianyang said casually. Then he walked away with a smug grin on his face. Inside the court hall, the emperor sat on his throne sipping the tea slowly, letting the fragrance float down to the officials standing below. People were licking their lips. He finished the whole cup before saying a single word. Then came business. The finance minister reported that floods had destroyed 2 dams, 3,000 people were affected, and they needed 30,000 taels. The treasury could only cover 20,000. The emperor rubbed his forehead. Same old story. Disasters everywhere, treasury empty, and everyone looking at his personal savings. He gritted his teeth. "I'll cover the remaining 10,000 from my personal funds." The ministers sighed with relief. The finance minister practically cheered. "Your Majesty is wise," the emperor thought bitterly to himself. Of course he's wise when he's spending his own money. He'd scraped together 20,000 taels over years of living frugally, and half of it just vanished in one sentence. He really needed that tea to sell well. Then the emperor turned his attention to the city. He called out the commander in charge of the capital's streets, a man named Fan Tsong, and ripped into him. When I returned to the city, the streets were filthy. Sewage everywhere. Mud and garbage in the roads. "What exactly do you do with your salary?" Fan Tsong tried to explain. "The drainage gets blocked. The dust mixes with rain. It's always been like this." "Always been like this? Is that supposed to make it acceptable? You have 3 months. Fix the streets. Clear the drains. Find the money yourself. If nothing has changed in 3 months, you're done." Fan Tsong hit the floor. "Yes, Your Majesty. 3 months. Everything will be different." The emperor nodded coldly. He was thinking about my stone-paved streets, my clean gutters, my sanitation officers with red armbands fining people for spitting. A tiny county in the mountains had better infrastructure than the capital of the empire. That burned him up inside. And it was all because of me, though I was probably napping through the whole thing. I was back in Tian doing my thing while, unbeknownst to me, my tea had taken the capital by storm. After court that morning, the senior ministers went back to their office. Zhang Dongxiang, the impatient one, couldn't stop talking about how the emperor seemed like a different person, giving money without arguing, suddenly caring about dirty streets. Something had changed. Then the conversation turned to my tea. Li Yensong, the chief minister, sent a clerk named Lu Er to go find it in the city. An hour later, Lu Er came running back, out of breath. "Did you get it?" Li Yinsong asked. "No, I couldn't afford it." He'd brought 10 taels, thinking that was more than enough for tea. But the grand heavenly immortal tea was 50 taels per jar, 1 liang per jar. And there was a purchase limit, 1 jar per person. Zhang Dongxiang jumped out of his chair. "That expensive? Is anyone actually buying it?" Lu Er laughed bitterly. "Everyone's buying it. Servants and family members from noble households are lining up. They're saying it's the emperor's favorite tea with miraculous effects." By the time I left, people were reselling jars outside the shop for 60 taels. And the shop only releases 4 jin per day. They say most of the supply goes to the palace and it could run out at any time. The ministers couldn't believe it. Their colleagues had moved faster than them. Li Yinsong stayed calm. He figured the craze was mostly because the emperor was drinking it. The imperial endorsement was doing all the heavy lifting. He gave Lu Er 50 taels and told him to go first thing tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Gua Tianyang burst into the emperor's study grinning from ear to ear. "Your Majesty, the grand heavenly immortal tea sold out. We only released 4 jin today, 2,000 taels in revenue. We still have 16 jin left. If we sell it all, that's 8,000 taels." He was practically dancing. I remembered what that Fong fellow said about hunger marketing, so I held back most of the stock. If I hadn't limited it, the whole supply would have been gone in one day. Should we raise the price tomorrow? At this rate, 80 taels a jar would still sell out. The emperor stared out the window for a moment, then burst out laughing. "Brilliant. That boy is truly something. I just spent 10,000 taels from my personal savings this morning, and now I'm about to earn 8,000 back. And this is only the beginning. But no, do not raise the price." I remember what Fang Jingyi said. Once you set a price, you don't change it. It damages the brand. If you want higher prices, send people to buy from the shop and resell outside at a markup. He called them scalpers. Find some trustworthy people to be our scalpers. The higher they can sell, the better. The emperor was getting excited now. He could already picture his personal treasury filling back up. Gua Tianyang pointed out the obvious problem. "Your Majesty, we only have 16 jin left. That won't last long. I should send someone to Tuyin immediately to buy more." "No." The emperor waved his hand. "I'm going myself." Gua Tianyang's jaw dropped. "Again? You're going back?" "Yes." Everything Fang Jingyi predicted at that dinner table is happening exactly as he described. I want to see what other miracles he can pull off. Prepare everything. Once the inspector from Hengjiang Prefecture arrives, I'm going back to Tuyin. And there I was, probably sleeping 12 hours a day, completely unaware that the emperor of the entire nation was planning a second trip to my county. All because of some cheap tea leaves I'd bought for practically nothing and roasted with a handful of herbs. My marketing lecture over chicken soup was apparently the most profitable dinner conversation in the history of the empire. Back at the capital, the ministers were losing their minds over my tea. The next morning, the clerk Lu Er had gone at the crack of dawn to buy a jar. But the line was already out the door and everything was sold out. He had to buy from a scalper for 70 taels, 20 more than the shop price. He sheepishly told Chief Minister Li Yinsong about the extra cost. Li Yinsong nearly fell off his chair. 70 taels. The tea in our office kitchen costs 3 taels a jin. He paid the man back and told him to brew it up, with clean water only, nothing added. Lu Er came back with a teapot. Zhang Dongxiang peeked inside and found 3 sad little leaves floating around. "Are you joking? 3 leaves?" Lu Er grinned nervously. "It was so expensive, I was afraid to waste it." Zhang Dongxiang grabbed the jar himself and tossed in a proper pinch. They all gathered around the pot like children, watching the leaves unfurl and the fragrance rise. They poured a cup each. Li Yinsong took a careful sip, letting the warmth slide down his throat. After years of drinking that heavy, over-seasoned tea soup everyone was used to, loaded with dates and ginger and who knows what, this was completely different. Just the pure, clean taste of tea. He loved it. Zhang Dongxiang drank his and shrugged. "It's all right. Needs some dates and scallions, though. Would taste better with some kick." Everyone stared at him. Then Zheng Qiao, the quiet one, spoke up. He'd studied herbal medicine in his youth. He said the tea had traces of licorice, mint, and yijiaoting vine. Each one had its own health properties, clearing heat, calming the mind, improving blood flow. The faint grassiness meant the tea leaves were exceptionally fresh and full of vitality. A tea that blends three medicinal elements while remaining vibrant and alive, truly worthy of the name grand, heavenly, immortal tea. 50 taels. Not expensive at all. Everyone's eyes lit up. They stared at their cups with newfound reverence and started sipping with the concentration of monks in meditation. Remarkable. I can taste the mint now. This tea makes me want to write poetry. The whole office erupted into reciting verses and declaring they needed to buy more. Luer stood at the door, watching the rare scene of the empire's most powerful bureaucrats giddy over tea, drool running down his own chin. What Zheng Xiao had detected, of course, were the cheap herbs I tossed into the roasting pan. A handful of licorice, some mint, a bit of yijiaoting, stuff that costs almost nothing at Hengjiang's market. But put it in a fancy jar, slap the emperor's implied endorsement on it, and suddenly it's a miracle medicine worth 70 taels on the black market. I didn't know any of this was happening. I was doing my usual rounds, checking on the tea workshop with Zhang Biao. My guys were stripped to the waist, working the big iron woks, roasting batch after batch. I was planning to stockpile inventory. I figured Li Long would need a month or two to sell through what he'd bought. No rush. The rest of the empire was still drinking that old-fashioned boiled tea soup with all the garbage mixed in. Once people tasted proper roasted leaf tea, there'd be no going back. History had already proven that. The only question was how fast Li Long could move it. I watched the workers for a while, nodding with satisfaction. Then I spotted something in the corner and lost it. Which idiot put the tea leaves next to the hay bales? Do you people have any pride in your work? If the flavor gets contaminated, I'll hang all of you from the city wall and watch those herb ratios. Pick out every last twig and stem after roasting. This isn't for us. This is for export. Quality control must be consistent. Every batch has to taste exactly the same. Understood? The roasters snapped to attention and shouted in unison. Yes, sir. Understood. That's how I ran things. I had no idea my cheap tea was being treated like liquid gold 500 taels a gene. Honestly, if I'd known, I probably would have raised my price. While I was busy roasting tea and yelling at my workers, the emperor's tea business was exploding beyond anyone's expectations. Guo Tianyang rushed in to report. All the tea had sold out in just 3 days. The emperor was actually annoyed. He told the old eunuch to slow down the sales so there wouldn't be a gap before he could restock. But the demand was too insane to hold back. Total revenue, 13,200 taels. After expenses, the shop, the staff, the original purchase from me, the net profit was 10,500 taels. The emperor's eyes went red. He shot out of his chair and started pacing, mumbling to himself. 10,500 taels. My savings are back. I need 2,000 jin more. Must go to Tuyuan immediately. Then his mood turned dark. He realized something. His ministers, the same people who came begging him for money every week, who drained the national treasury dry, were buying tea by the dozen jin at 50, 60, 70 taels a pop. 3,000 people had drowned in floods, and not one of these rich officials donated a single coin. But they had plenty of cash for luxury tea. Good. Very good, he muttered coldly. Then Guo Tianyang mentioned that the inspector from Hengjiang Prefecture had arrived. The emperor said to bring him to the study. Oh, and how is the crown prince? Guo Tianyang's face froze. He's still hanging in the garden. What? It's been 3 days, the emperor panicked. It was February, still cold. He'd forgotten about his own son. Guo Tianyang had forgotten too, because he'd been having too much fun playing tea merchant. Thankfully, guards had been feeding the prince during meals, lowering him down and hoisting him back up, and covering him with blankets at night. He was fine physically. The emperor sighed with relief, then felt guilty. Bring him to my study. 3 days had changed the prince. Day 1, he begged for mercy. Day 2, he tried bribing the guards and even attempted 2 escape runs. Both failed. By day 3, he'd given up completely and started appreciating the garden scenery while muttering to himself. When Guo Tianyang came to cut him down, the prince looked at him coldly. So the tyrant sent you? Guo Tianyang nearly had a heart attack and clamped his hand over the prince's mouth. Your Highness, you cannot say such things, the prince exploded. 3 days. I was hung up for 3 days. He doesn't care about anything but himself. They walked to the study. The prince kicked open the doors, locked eyes with the emperor, and opened his mouth to shout. Tear. The emperor cut him off gently. Yuan Zhao, are you all right? He walked over and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. His voice was soft, concerned. He apologized for forgetting him and told him he needed to learn from this, to listen to his teachers, to understand that when a prince misbehaves, the whole nation suffers. The prince's eyes turned red. He couldn't remember the last time his father had spoken to him like this. He thought of being small, riding on his father's shoulders. The angry words stuck in his throat. He couldn't bring himself to yell, but couldn't bring himself to apologize either. He managed 3 mumbled words. The emperor smiled. Then his expression turned cold. Were you about to call me a tyrant? Corner. Kneel. You stay there until I say you can leave. The prince deflated completely and shuffled to the corner. Then the inspector from Hengjiang was called in, a man named Wu Sheng. He looked half dead, having ridden nonstop for 2 days with no idea why the emperor had summoned him. He knelt before the throne. Your humble servant Wu Sheng. Greetings to your majesty. The emperor stared down at him. You are Wu Sheng. You've traveled far. I won't waste your time. Tell me, do you know about Tuyuan County? Wu Sheng's whole body went rigid. His eyes went wide. And somewhere far away, I was probably asleep. I had a feeling my name was being mentioned in places it shouldn't be, but I figured that was just the draft coming through my window. I should probably explain what happened with that Inspector Wu Sheng, since it's going to make me look bad. But in my defense, I had very good reasons. Back at the palace, Wu Sheng was kneeling before the emperor, white as a ghost and shaking like a leaf. The emperor asked him about Tuyuan County. Wu Sheng stuck to the script, the same script I'd drilled into him years ago. Tuyuan? About 2,000 people, very poor, barely surviving. The previous magistrates starved to death, so the prefecture waived their taxes. The emperor let the silence drag out. Then he said calmly, I've been to Tuyuan myself. Wu Sheng's soul left his body. He'd assumed this was about tax records, something he could talk his way out of. But the emperor had walked my streets, slept in my inn, and drunk toilet water through his servant. There was no lying his way out of this. The emperor asked what I'd given Wu Sheng to make him risk his life covering for me. Wu Sheng broke down completely, blood running down his forehead from kowtowing, tears mixing with the blood. It's not what he gave me. It's what he did to me. That man is not human. Then he told them the whole story. A few years back, Wu Sheng had come to inspect Tuyuan and found it thriving. Tall walls, prosperous people, nothing like the records said. He was thrilled and wanted to report the good news to the court. I couldn't let that happen. So I had him tied up and brought to the county office. While he was there, Zhang Biao happened to be outside sewing up some guy's backside for using a wooden toilet stick. Wu Sheng saw it through the window. That set the mood nicely. I told him he was not allowed to report anything about Tuyuan. He agreed immediately. The Zhang Biao demonstration had been very persuasive. But I knew a scared promise wouldn't hold forever. So I took it further. I had his clothes removed, tied him to a chair, and brought in my sketch artist. This was someone I'd trained personally. The only person in the county who could draw realistic portraits in a style nobody in this world had ever seen. The artist drew Wu Sheng, naked, in perfect, lifelike detail. I told Wu Sheng that if he ever breathed a word about Tuyuan, I'd print thousands of copies and distribute them across the empire. His career and reputation would be finished. Everyone in the room clenched up at that part. But I wasn't done. After the portrait, I kept Wu Sheng undressed and marched him over to my sound recording device, the big horn with the needle and the silver foil. I made him swear a terrible oath into the horn, his voice scratching into the metal foil as he spoke. That was when Wu Sheng's emotions overwhelmed him, and he passed out right there on the study floor. Guo Tianyang pressed his pressure points and poured tea into his mouth to revive him. The emperor was desperate to know more. He'd seen that same horn when he signed his own trade contract with me. He'd been curious about it then. Now he was realizing the device had other uses, like recording evidence of a naked man swearing loyalty under duress. Over in the corner, the crown prince was having the time of his life. He'd been kneeling there bored out of his mind, and now he had front row seats to the most entertaining story he'd ever heard. He was dying to know what the oath said and what happened next. Look, I know it sounds extreme, but I needed Tuyuan to stay hidden. A man's got to protect what he's built. And Wu Sheng was fine. He went home with all his limbs attached, which is more than most people get from crossing Zhang Biao. The recording, the portrait, the oath, that was my insurance policy. And it had worked perfectly for years. until the emperor decided to take a vacation through my front door. After Guotianyang revived Wu Sheng, the inspector broke down completely. He forced me to say I had relations with my family's dog. He wouldn't let me leave until I said it. The crown prince burst out laughing from his corner. The emperor silenced him with a death glare. The emperor frowned. So what if he forced you? Nobody would believe it, even if it got out. Wu Sheng shook his head wildly. The horn. That horn can record voices. Everything I said came back out of it, word for word, in my own voice. He threatened to play the recording for the whole world if I ever talked about Tuyuan. He said it's like getting mud on your pants. Doesn't matter if it's not actually shit. Everyone will think it is. I'm a scholar. How could he do this to me? He's not human. He's a devil. Wu Sheng grabbed Guotianyang's leg and sobbed uncontrollably. But the emperor and Guotianyang had stopped listening to the crying. They were both frozen, thinking about the same thing. The horn. The recording device. They had both spoken into that same horn when they signed my trade contract. Their voices, reading out my ridiculous confidentiality agreement with all those curses, were sitting on a piece of silver foil somewhere in my office. Guotianyang went pale, muttering to himself. That bastard. That absolute bastard. The emperor was shaking with anger. He'd spent several minutes reading poisonous oaths into that thing. Every word preserved perfectly. The crown prince, meanwhile, was practically bouncing with excitement in his corner. He thought I was the most entertaining person in the world. He was dying to meet me. Wu Sheng, now that everything was out, added one more detail. He also gave me a house and 500 taels of silver. Said I could retire in Tuyuan someday. The emperor paced back and forth, thinking it over. He still admired my abilities, but I'd clearly gone too far. Using a magical voice recording device to blackmail an imperial inspector? Keeping an entire county hidden from the throne? All because I wanted to stay in my comfortable little kingdom? Finally, he gave his judgment. Wu Sheng was stripped of his title and demoted to commoner for taking bribes. But his life was spared. The emperor told him he could go wherever he wanted, back to Hengjiang or to Tuyuan, and to keep his mouth shut about everything. Wu Sheng was overjoyed. Losing his job was nothing. He could go live in my county and eat well for the rest of his life. He cowed out his thanks and scrambled out. After he left, Guotianyang said the emperor had been too lenient. The emperor just looked at him. If it were you, what would you have done? Guotianyang opened his mouth, then closed it. Even a eunuch needed his dignity. If I'd done all that to him, he wasn't sure he could have held out either. The emperor sighed. A device that records the human voice. It's practically divine. And that fool uses it for blackmail. What a waste of talent. I want to beat him with a stick. Then he announced he was going back to Tuyuan. The crown prince jumped to his feet. Father, take me with you. Absolutely not. You'll just cause trouble. Fine. Then I'll rebuild the tiger garden while you're gone. I'm never going to court. Not in this lifetime. The emperor raised his hand to slap him. Guotianyang stepped in quickly and whispered, Your Majesty, perhaps taking the prince would be wise. He's lived in the palace his whole life. Tuyuan is full of strange, wonderful things. It might broaden his mind. Besides, it's only 2 or 3 days. The emperor thought about it. Fine. But 3 rules. You don't reveal you're the crown prince. You stay by my side at all times. And when we return, whatever I say goes. No arguments. Deal. The prince agreed without hesitation. He didn't care about the conditions. He just wanted to meet the man who made imperial inspectors confess to sleeping with dogs. After the prince left, Guotianyang asked why the emperor didn't just summon me to the capital. The emperor explained his real plan. He wanted to observe me more. My abilities were proven, but my character needed testing. He was actually thinking long-term, about the crown prince's future. His reasoning was clever. I had no interest in political power. I wouldn't form factions at court. My personality guaranteed that other officials would dislike me, which meant I'd never join any clique. Capable, unambitious, and unpopular, the perfect loyal servant for a future emperor who needed someone trustworthy. Then Guotianyang raised the real issue. Your Majesty, he still has our recording, the one where we read those oaths. The emperor's head started hurting. They'd used fake names, sure, but the voices were real. We'll deal with that later. After we bring him to the capital, and somewhere in Tuyuan, I was sleeping peacefully, with absolutely no idea that the emperor, his most trusted eunuch, and the crown prince of the entire empire were all about to show up at my door for round 2. and that I was being groomed for a political career I absolutely did not want. 3 days later, the emperor, the crown prince, and Guetianyang snuck out of the palace again in the dead of night. Before they could leave, a clerk had come running with an urgent report from Chief Minister Li Yensong. The emperor read it, and his face went dark. The floods at Zhanjiang had gotten much worse. 5 dams destroyed now, thousands of people displaced, and the governor was requesting 200,000 taels for relief. The treasury didn't have it. The emperor's personal savings didn't have it. And the rain wasn't stopping. He decided to go to Tuyuan anyway. Staying in the capital wouldn't help. He'd buy more tea to restock his business, and maybe, just maybe, I'd have some ideas about the flooding. On the road, the emperor studied his maps. The crown prince got bored and eventually took a look too. He actually impressed his father by analyzing the flood's path correctly, tracing it from one town to the next, calculating the timing of the reports. Then the prince pointed to a spot called Intoa, where 2 mountains flanked the river, and suggested they redirect the floodwaters eastward where there were no villages. How would you redirect it? The emperor asked. The prince got excited. Summoned Taoist monks to cast spells. Called down heavenly lightning to blow up the mountain and block the river. The emperor snatched the map back and smacked him on the head. What kind of garbage have you been reading? If there were real immortals with that kind of power, nobody would have ever died in a flood. Burn all his fantasy novels when we get back. The carriage went quiet after that. By the next afternoon, they'd arrived in Tuyuan. The prince jumped out of the carriage and his jaw dropped. Clean streets, lively people, beautiful buildings. Nothing like what his tutors had told him about life outside the palace. My teacher said commoners are dirty and everything outside is filthy. They were completely wrong. This is way more interesting than the palace. The emperor reminded him of their cover names. Li Long the merchant, Li Yuan for the prince, Guida for Guetianyang. The prince nodded without really listening, too busy gawking at everything. They checked into my inn. The innkeeper recognized the emperor from his first visit. Welcome back, sir. Here for more goods? They got 2 first-class rooms. And then, just like his father before him, the crown prince found the toilet. There's a well in the room. Guetianyang, bring me a cup. I want to taste this water. Guetianyang's face crumpled. He'd been waiting for this exact moment. He rushed over before the prince could scoop anything up. Your Highness, that is a toilet. For relieving yourself. See this rope? You pull it and water flushes everything away. The prince's face turned slightly pink. Then he discovered the flushing mechanism and started pulling the rope over and over, completely fascinated. Guetianyang sighed with relief and left him to it. Meanwhile, Zhang Biao had spotted the visitors the moment they entered the city and ran to tell me. Boss, those 2 porcelain merchants are back. They're at the inn. I was still in bed. Yeah, I know. Want me to bring them over? Then it hit me. They'd only left 7 days ago. 20 jin of tea, sold in 7 days? Minus travel time. They'd probably cleared it all in less than 3. That's incredibly fast for a brand new product in a new market. These guys were serious operators. And they were back for more, which meant money was coming. I shot upright in bed, then immediately lay back down. Got up too fast, head rush. Don't bring them here. I'll go to them personally. Xiao Tao, get my clothes. I got dressed, climbed into my sedan chair, and headed for the inn. But the moment I stepped out of the chair at the front door, a wall of stench hit me in the face. The inn's servants were frantically carrying buckets of water in and out. The innkeeper was fanning the doorway desperately. The place reeked like an open sewer. I covered my nose and stormed over. The innkeeper saw me and almost burst into tears. Before he could speak, I kicked him in the backside. What the hell happened here? Did the cesspit explode? He grabbed my leg and wailed. It's not my fault. Someone drained all the water from the rooftop tank. The toilets can't flush. We're refilling it now. Right then, the emperor, the prince, and Guetianyang came down the stairs holding their noses. When the prince saw me yelling at the innkeeper, his face turned red and he quietly slid behind his father. I had a pretty good idea who'd emptied the water tower by playing with the flush rope 50 times in a row, but I didn't know it yet. I kicked the innkeeper off my leg and told him to stop embarrassing himself in the street. Go carry water. Fix this mess. Did you feed the guests laxatives? How is everyone producing this much? He grabbed a bucket and ran. The emperor and his group came downstairs. I spotted Old Li right away and went over with a big smile. Old Li, you're back. The tea business must be going well in the capital. Gwada gave me a sour look. Yeah, I noticed. Last time I called him Mr. Lee. Now that he was making me money, he was Old Lee. Sue me. There was a new face with them, a teenage boy. Old Lee introduced him as his son, Lee Yuan, and said he was bringing the kid out to see the world. I gave the boy the standard flattery. What a fine young man. Like father, like son. The kid lifted his chin proudly. A bit dim, this one. I got straight to business. Old Lee, how did the 20 gene of tea sell? 13,200 taels. I nearly choked on my own breath. This man was ruthless. My garbage tea pulled in that much money? I'd clearly found the right partner. How much do you want this time? How much do you have? However much you want. I can provide. I was grinning ear to ear. Old Lee had tasted blood and was going all in. Honestly, I knew the tea was mediocre stuff. It would ride the wave for a while, but eventually I'd need to develop a genuinely premium product. For now, though, the smart move was to let Old Lee buy as much as possible while the hype lasted. 200 gene, he said. Done. I'll have it ready after lunch. We went to Ching Chong House for a proper meal. Old Lee's kid kept gawking at everything on the way. He acted like he'd never been outside before. Once the food arrived, I pointed at my signature dish. Try this. Braised pork belly with glass noodles. Best thing in Tuyuan. Rich, flavorful, you'll never forget it. The boy had his chopsticks halfway to the plate, then slowly pulled them back. He wrinkled his nose. Pork is foul. Nobody eats it. Is this how you treat your guests? Oh, a little tough guy? I hadn't seen attitude like this in ages. I was about to have fun with him, but Old Lee cut in with a sharp voice. Lee Yuan, mind your manners. My apologies, Magistrate Fong. The boy is young and doesn't know proper behavior. I waved it off. No problem. What's youth for if not being bold? I like his spirit. The kid looked at me with surprise. Then he quietly started eating. I explained that pork had a bad reputation everywhere because of its strong gamey smell. But in Tuyuan, our pork was different, fragrant, tender, no smell at all. Better than lamb. Old Lee tried a piece. His eyes went wide. Incredible. Rich and savory, but not greasy at all. How is this possible? Gwada and the boy tried it too. Same reaction, pure amazement. Gwada asked if we had a special breed of pig. I shook my head. No special breed. The secret is castration. Gwada's face instantly turned to stone. You castrate the piglets young. After that, they become docile, gain weight fast, and the meat loses all that gamey smell. Same principle works with people, actually. Castrated men tend to grow tall and big, have calm temperaments, and even live longer. Although, with people, I think the castration makes them smellier, not less. Strange how that works. I gave a thumbs up and flashed my best smile. So really, castration is a profound art. Castrated is better. Gwada looked like he wanted to murder me right there. I'd managed to insult him at every single meal we'd shared. What had I ever done to deserve his dirty looks? I was just making conversation. The boy's eyes kept darting to Gwada. His shoulders were shaking. Whatever was in his mouth was about to come flying out. Then Old Lee reached under the table and pinched the kid's thigh hard, and the boy went still. I noticed Gwada wasn't eating. My generous nature kicked in. I picked up a beautiful piece of pork belly and dropped it in his bowl. Don't let the castration thing put you off, mister. Gwa. This is a pig of noble character, elegant, refined, a pig that serves the people. All worldly attachments removed. Truly special. And the meat doesn't just taste good. It strengthens the body and boosts male vitality. Eat enough, and who knows? Maybe you'll get a second spring in life. Go on, eat. Old Lee sprayed pork across the table. Sorry. Cough. Went down the wrong pipe. Cough. Careful there, Old Lee. Don't waste good food. Gwada silently shoved the pork into his mouth and ground it between his teeth, like he was chewing on my bones. I couldn't figure out why this guy always seemed upset with me. I was being perfectly friendly. At the table, Old Lee's boy was shoveling food into his mouth like a starving animal. The kid had clearly never tasted anything like Tuyuan cooking before. We use high heat, lots of oil and salt, proper stir-frying. Old Lee kept kicking him under the table to slow down, but the boy couldn't help himself. I waved it off. Let him eat. When I was his age, I ate twice as much. The boy shot me a grateful look. Seemed like he'd expected me to be some kind of monster, but I was winning him over with basic decency and good pork. I steered the conversation back to business. I suggested Oldley should drop the porcelain trade entirely and focus on tea. The grand heavenly immortal tea was just the beginning. I was planning better products down the line. Then Oldley brought up something unexpected. He sighed and mentioned the Jianzhong floods, said the rains had been non-stop, dams were breaking, and it was hurting his porcelain supply routes from the south. He seemed genuinely worried, more worried than a regular merchant should be about a regional disaster. He even said, almost under his breath, that the court needed 20,000 taels for relief but couldn't find the money. If someone could solve this crisis, their career would be made. Interesting. This porcelain merchant sure had detailed knowledge of government finances. I asked where exactly the flooding was. Oldley told Guoda to bring out a map, and when Guoda unrolled it, I nearly fell off my chair. It was a full national military map. Every province, every river, every coastline. This thing was classified. I couldn't get one even if I tried. These merchants had connections to the Ministry of War. Oldley gave me some story about needing it for his nationwide porcelain business. Sure, Oldley, sure. I let it go because the map itself was fascinating. The coastlines didn't match anything I remembered from my old world, which confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't any version of China I'd studied. Oldley traced the flood's path for me, starting at Jinli, smashing through several towns downstream, probably already past Pingwang by now. The situation was getting worse every day. I studied the map carefully. Then I saw it, a spot called Intoa, where the river passed between two mountains. If you could collapse one of those mountains into the river, you'd block the floodwaters completely. This place, Intoa, I said, pointing. Mountains on both sides. If you could bring down heavenly thunder to blast the mountain and block the river, the flooding would stop. The question is whether the terrain is right. All three of them froze like statues. The boy jumped up from his seat, practically glowing. Father, that's exactly what I said. Summon the kingdom's sorcerers and call down thunder. Great minds think alike. The other three turned and stared at him like he was an idiot. He sat back down and went back to eating. Oldley laughed bitterly. Magistrate Fong, you can't be serious. Where would heavenly thunder come from? Can you summon it? I sipped my tea and didn't answer. I was thinking. Because the thing is, I actually could. Years ago, when the two kingdoms were still at war, I'd been terrified that if the Qin kingdom won, their army would march right past Tuan on the way to the capital. I didn't have time to train soldiers or forge weapons. Steel was hard to come by, but gunpowder was easy. I'd spent months manufacturing and stockpiling massive quantities of the stuff. Sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter. I had the formula memorized from my old life. By the time the war ended with Jing's victory, I had tons of explosives sitting in my warehouses, never used. The only time I'd set any off was when we discovered an asphalt deposit and needed to blast it open. Those explosives were still there, sitting in storage. My biggest worry wasn't them going bad. It was them accidentally going off and taking half the county with them. Using them to blow up a mountain. More than enough. Getting rid of them would actually be a relief. But here was my problem. If I revealed I had gunpowder, a weapon nobody in this world had ever seen, there was no going back. The court would find out about me. My quiet life as a small-town king would be over forever. On the other hand, thousands of people were drowning. I had the means to help. It would barely cost me anything. If I did nothing, how would I sleep at night? I sat there weighing it, my comfortable life against other people's lives. Oldley was watching me intently. Something in my expression must have given me away, because his eyes suddenly went wide. He leaned forward. Magistrate Fong, do you actually have a way? Let me think about it. I mumbled. What I didn't realize was that all three of them were staring at me with a mixture of shock and desperate hope. They thought I might actually be able to pull off the impossible. And honestly, I probably could. I looked up and caught all three of them staring at me like I'd just announced I could fly. I quickly laughed it off. Eat. Why's everyone looking at me? Thunder. The thunder, the boy shouted excitedly. There's no such thing as heavenly thunder. Don't believe in fairy tales. Let's finish eating, and I'll give the young master a proper tour of the county. My face was relaxed, but inside I was kicking myself. Damn you, Oldley. If you hadn't brought up the flooding, I wouldn't be torturing myself with this moral dilemma. Ever since I arrived in this world, I've been dealing with one disaster after another. I'd finally gotten 2 good years of peace, and now this? The table went quiet. Nobody mentioned the floods again. After lunch, I offered to personally show them around Tuyuan. Oldley had two questions he'd been wanting to ask. First, why share such a profitable opportunity with me instead of keeping it yourself? Second, I've traveled everywhere and never seen an official treat merchants with such respect. Why? Fair questions. I gave him my honest answers. I hand it to you because my people are simple folk. They can do business inside too and where I can protect them, but out in the wider world they'd get eaten alive. As for respecting merchants, think about it. A farmer's rice is worth a few coins. But roast it, brew it, move it to the right place, and it's worth 100 times more. That's what merchants do. They distribute resources where they're needed most. Without them, nothing reaches its full value. My county was forgotten by the court for years. All the official positions are still empty. So I adjusted things my own way, and that included treating merchants as equals. Other places might look down on trade, but not Tuyuan. Then I casually added, by the way, we're building new houses on the south side. Interested in buying one? We even offer loans. Tuyuan is the best place for living and retirement, guaranteed. Guida couldn't hold back. Merchants don't produce anything. If everyone became a merchant, the world would fall apart. I stared at him. You are a merchant. Whose side are you on? He realized his mistake and backpedaled. Well, it's been common wisdom since ancient times. I cut him off. Since ancient times, people rode on turtle shells. Why are you using paper? Since ancient times, people farmed with fire. Why do we have plows now? Just because something is old doesn't make it right. A person can farm and trade and read. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Old Gua, for a businessman, your thinking is awfully rigid. Then I turned to Oldley. Your accountant has a rebellious streak. He clearly looks down on you. Guida sputtered. That's not. I didn't. Don't twist my words. Oldley stepped in with a stern face. Guida was out of line. I'll discipline him when we get home. Guida looked like a wronged housewife. I could see him cursing me in his head, but he pressed his lips together and didn't say another word for the rest of the walk. The boy, meanwhile, was having the time of his life watching me argue. He ran off to a bookstall while we were talking. When I caught up, I peeked over his shoulder and my face went hot. He was holding a book called Magistrate Fong Battles Thanos. Some clever bastard in my county had turned one of the bedtime stories I made up for kids into an actual printed book. It was about an alien demon named Thanos invading the Empire, and me collecting 7 Infinity Stones to help the Emperor defeat him. What's this about? The boy asked the vendor. You must be from out of town. It's our biggest seller. Magistrate Fong fights an evil demon lord from beyond the heavens. 50 copper coins. The boy flipped through more books. Young Arshu, Knights of the Martial Forest, The Golden Magistrate, all written in plain everyday language instead of formal literary Chinese. Why is everything in simple speech? This is crude. What a waste of paper. Oldley noticed too. Magistrate Fong. Does anyone in this county just publish books? All in common language? I explained. Anyone who pays can get a book printed at my press. As for the plain language, most people here were refugees who could barely read. If they can recognize characters and enjoy a story, that's already wonderful. Giving them classical texts would just frustrate them. The boy argued back. It's vulgar. You need 40 words to say what classical Chinese says in 14. I smiled. That's actually one of the advantages. Take a 14-character classical poem and rewrite it in plain speech. Suddenly, it's 39 characters. That's 25 extra characters per sentence. A whole book in plain speech uses twice the paper and ink. Twice the paper means the printing shop doubles in size. Double the shop means double the workers. Double the workers means double the demand for paper makers and ink producers. And the suppliers need to grow too. In the end, the reader gets a book they can actually understand, and more people get jobs. Everyone wins. The boy's mouth hung open. He felt like something was wrong with my logic, but couldn't put his finger on it. Oldley gave me a strange look, like his brain was short-circuiting. And Guada, who'd sworn to stay silent, was grinding his teeth so hard I could hear it. I could practically see the words in his head. This devil has bewitched them again. Oldley stood there looking awkward after my speech about plain language books creating jobs. I could tell he was half convinced and half suspicious that I'd just talked nonsense with a straight face. His boy recovered first. Why not just burn the books? That would save even more trouble. I sighed and patted Oldley on the shoulder. Oldley, your son's thinking has some problems. Wanting to burn books. That's concerning. Oldley erupted at the kid. Shut your mouth. Who asked you? I've spoiled you too much. Now you want to burn books? The boy stared at his father with wounded eyes. I grinned. Relax, Oldly. He's just a kid. But no more talk of burning books. Play with fire and you'll wet the bed. The boy glared daggers at me. I could practically read his thoughts. I never said I'd burn anything. You twisted my words and told on me. I thought you were decent. Turns out you're scum. He clamped his mouth shut and didn't say another word. So for the rest of the afternoon, Old Lee and I strolled happily through town chatting, while behind us Gwida and the boy followed in miserable silence. People on the street kept giving us odd looks. We spent half the day touring the county. By sunset, we parted ways. They went back to the inn and I headed home. What I didn't know was that Old Lee sat in his room that evening studying his map, still thinking about the floods. He told Gwida to stay and watch the boy, then headed out to find me at the county office. Gwida tried to talk him out of it. You really think that man can summon thunder? Old Lee said he could tell from my expression at lunch that I might actually have something. I just didn't want to reveal it because I was afraid of attracting the court's attention. He was frustrated with me. A man of such talent hiding in a tiny county, refusing to serve the nation. He's no better than an animal. If he wants money, I can make him the richest man alive. Why cling to this little place? Before leaving, Old Lee went to check on his son. The boy's door was unlocked. He'd never learned basic caution, having been waited on his whole life. Old Lee shook his head. At least this trip was teaching the kid something. He pushed the door open quietly. He expected the boy to be asleep, but there was a dim lamplight coming from the bedroom. He crept over and found the boy lying on his stomach under thick blankets, breathing heavily, completely absorbed in a book. Old Lee leaned in to see what it was. It was one of my plain language novels. The Golden Magistrate. The boy had secretly bought it at the bookstall when nobody was looking. The chapter he was reading involved a female spy named Fong Kulian getting captured and interrogated by the county magistrate. Let's just say the content was vivid. Old Lee stared at the page for a moment, then closed his eyes in pain. This kid, reading trash like this with total concentration. My county was clearly a bad influence. The magistrate was improper, so naturally the books were improper too. He snatched the book away. The boy jolted, then turned around furious, until he saw who it was. His face went white, and he yanked the blankets up tight. Father, what brings you here? Old Lee rolled up the book and started smacking the boy with it. You won't study proper books, but you'll read this? Look at your behavior today. No manners at the table, no dignity standing up. If I don't teach you a lesson, this whole trip was pointless. The boy blocked with one arm, while clutching the blankets with the other, begging for mercy. I bought it to study the plain language writing style. It's research. Gwida came running in and threw himself at Old Lee's feet. Please calm down. He's still a child. A child reads this. Old Lee flung the book at Gwida's face. The old man didn't even dodge, just caught it with his forehead. Old Lee grabbed the book back, stuffed it under his arm, and stormed out to find me at the county office. After he left, Gwida wiped his sweat and called out softly, Young master, you can come out now. He's gone. The boy threw a pillow at Gwida's face from under the covers. Get out. I'm not wearing pants. That evening, Old Lee came to find me at the county office. It was his first time walking through Tuyuan at night. I heard later that he was surprised to see shops still open and food vendors on the streets. Apparently, the capital has had a curfew for 10 years. No nightlife at all. What a miserable place. My guard stopped him at the gate, but he showed them the iron medallion I'd given him. They sent Xiao Tao to bring him in. On the walk through the courtyard, Old Lee asked Xiao Tao if I could really solve the flooding problem. She told him something that I would have found embarrassing if I'd heard it. My young master can't summon thunder. That's just stories for children. But if he says he can fix something, then it will be fixed. There's nothing in this world he can't do. Then she mentioned that I'd set out 2 cups of wine at my table before he arrived. She figured I'd been expecting him. She was right. I knew he'd come. The man cared too much about that flood to let it go. Old Lee found me sitting in my courtyard, holding up a wine cup toward the moon. I'll admit I was posing a little. A man's got to have some style. Old Lee, what brings you here so late? Sit down. He got straight to the point. Can you solve the Jianzhong flood or not? If you can, it would be a tremendous service to the empire. You'd get more than money. You might even receive a noble title. I laughed. Old Lee, I didn't know you cared so much about official ranks. Being an official is exhausting. Wouldn't it be nicer to just be rich and comfortable? He looked like he wanted to punch me. I'm a citizen of this empire. Helping the ruler is our duty. Don't you feel the same? I slapped the table. Of course. Day and night. All I think about is serving the emperor. I'd been wrestling with this decision all afternoon. On one hand, using my secret weapon meant exposing myself to the court forever. On the other hand, people were dying and I could stop it. In the end, my conscience won. Damn it. Old Lee, I'm going to give you a gift that could change your fortune. I have something in this county called boundless merit. It might be able to stop the flood. I can't guarantee it, but there's a good chance. His eyes lit up. What is boundless merit? You don't need to know the details. I'll send 20 of my men with the cargo to Jianjiang. The stuff is heavy, so it needs to go by cart to Jiangling port near the capital, then by boat south, then by cart again to the flood site. 7 days total. You'll need to arrange armed escorts along the way. My men will be risking their lives for this. So, I rubbed my fingers together. 20,000 taels, he said immediately. I just looked at him. 20,000? For explosives that could move mountains? Actually, I don't have that much, he admitted, embarrassed. No problem. Tuyuan County offers loans. 5,000 in interest. Total, 25,000 taels. But think carefully. If it doesn't work, you've lost everything. He agreed without hesitation. Smart man. If the court sent 200,000 taels for traditional relief, the money would vanish into bureaucracy with nothing to show for it. 25,000 for a real solution was a bargain. Then I got serious. I told him everything he needed to know about what comes after a flood. After the water recedes, there will be disease. Always. Burn all the bodies immediately. Move survivors to dry, ventilated areas. Cover standing water with isekai'd. Isolate anyone with fever or chills. If a plague breaks out, quarantine the sick and have everyone else cover their mouths and noses with cloth. This is experience my county has gathered over the years. Just follow the instructions. Old Lee's expression softened as I talked. I think he realized I'd been thinking about this all day. The plans were too detailed to be improvised. Maybe he understood that even if he hadn't come tonight, I would have found a way to help. When I finished, he stood up and bowed. On behalf of the people of Jianjiang, Li Long thanks Magistrate Fong. Then he grabbed the cup I'd set out for him and drained it in one gulp. He smacked his lips, looking confused. Old Lee, that was my rinse water. He stared at the empty cup in silence. After Old Lee and I worked out the details, he left my courtyard looking satisfied, though I noticed him holding his stomach. The rinse water thing really got to him. On his way out, he ran into Xiao Tao by the moon gate. She asked how things went, and he told her the deal was done. Then apparently Xiao Tao started talking about me. She told Old Lee things I'd rather keep private. She told him about the early years, how people used to starve to death in Tuyuan regularly. How I couldn't sleep at night back then, lying awake trying to figure out how to save one more person. She told him about the time a starving refugee died right in front of me, clutching my sleeve and crying out in pain while I could do nothing. She said I drank a lot that night and cried. Look, those were bad times. I don't like thinking about them. The whole reason I built Tuyuan into what it is now was so that would never happen again. Every clean street, every flush toilet, every stupid catchy jingle. It all started because I watched people die and swore I'd fix it. Xiao Tao finished by saying I'd never turn down someone asking for help with a disaster. She said I was a good man who couldn't stand watching others suffer. She also told Old Lee that neither she nor anyone in the county wanted me to leave Tuyuan. This life is good enough, she said. Old Lee went quiet for a while. Then he thanked her and left. Back at the inn, he told Guida everything. Guida was shocked about the price. 5,000 in interest on top of the 20,000, making it 25,000 total. Wait, actually the total came to 50,000 taels. Old Lee had agreed without hesitation. Guida got suspicious immediately. What if he's scamming you? You're just a merchant to him. What if this boundless merit doesn't even exist? Old Lee was calm. A man who values trade above everything wouldn't destroy his own reputation with fraud. Besides, even if he did cheat me, the money is borrowed from his own county. If it's a lie, I'll take his head. But what Old Lee kept to himself was the real reason he trusted me. Everything he'd seen in Tuyuan, the way people lived, the way they talked about me, what Xiao Tao said in the moonlight, it all pointed the same direction. I wasn't the type to con people. Annoying? Yes. Greedy? A little. But not dishonest about the things that mattered. Old Li told Guoda to arrange plainclothes escorts to meet my team at Jiangling port. He also wanted secret agents sent to Tuan to investigate what boundless merit actually was. He was dying to know what I was hiding. Then Guoda made the mistake of chuckling to himself. He was fantasizing about me getting caught and punished. Old Li heard it and turned cold. You'd be better off hoping Fang Jingyi succeeds. Your grudges over a few jokes are making you small-minded. If you can't let go of petty things, how can I trust you with real responsibilities? Guoda hit the floor, stammering excuses. I was laughing because I'm happy. Happy that the flood might be solved. Happy for you, sir. Old Li finished his tea, slammed the cup on the table, and told Guoda to go kneel in his room for the night. After Old Li went to bed, Guoda stood there alone, staring at the teacup. He realized something had shifted. Old Li's attitude toward me had grown even warmer after this visit. Whatever I'd said tonight, whatever Xiao Tao had told him, I was firmly planted in this man's heart now. Guoda wiped his forehead and made a decision. He needed to get on my good side. Fast. And I slept soundly that night, having no idea that the most powerful man in the empire now considered me irreplaceable, all because my adopted daughter couldn't keep her mouth shut about my crying over spilled lives. The next morning, Old Li and his group came to the county office bright and early. I had everything ready, the loan paperwork, the tea shipment, all of it. He signed the agreement, loaded up, and left. The boy didn't want to go. Guoda practically had to drag him onto the carriage. I could tell the kid had fallen in love with Tuyuan. Can't blame him, everyone does. On the road back, from what I heard later, Old Li asked the boy what he'd learned from the trip. Nothing, the boy mumbled. Then he quickly corrected himself. I mean, the people live well, which proves that. You work very hard, father. Old Li stared at him. The boy was clearly just saying what he thought his father wanted to hear. Old Li told him that when they reached the capital, the boy would walk home on foot through the city streets and report back on how the common people there actually lived. A comparison test, basically, Tuyuan versus the capital. The boy's mind was elsewhere. He was still thinking about my pork stew and planning to castrate a pig when he got home to see if it worked. He was also disappointed he never got to meet Zhang Biao or see my sound recording device. Then the boy blurted out, "Father, isn't Magistrate Fang wasted as a 7th-rank official? Poor Guoda." I heard he felt crushed hearing that. Years of loyal service, and a stranger he'd met twice had already surpassed him in the boy's eyes. Old Li agreed I was wasted. He said if I could actually solve the flood, I could have whatever title I wanted. The boy got excited. He's really going to fix the flood? Can he really call down thunder? There's no thunder. It was a joke. Go read your books. Then the boy said something that surprised everyone. If he solves the flood, I want Magistrate Fang to be my personal tutor. Old Li raised an eyebrow. Are the tutors at home not good enough? They're all fossils. If they had half of Magistrate Fang's way with words, I wouldn't skip class. You skip class? The argument escalated. Old Li threatening punishments. The boy arguing that classical learning was outdated, quoting my own arguments about tradition back at his father. Finally, Old Li made a deal. If you memorize 10 books cover to cover, I'll appoint Fang Jingyi to your personal advisory office. The boy's eyes lit up. Promise? No takebacks? A man's word is his bond. That deal was struck because of me, and I had absolutely no say in it. Somewhere in the universe, my fate as a comfortable small-town king was being dismantled piece by piece. When they reached the capital, Old Li dropped the boy off at the inner city gate to walk home alone, with hidden guards trailing him. Then he rushed straight to the palace. He hadn't been gone long, but the ministers were already in a panic. The chief minister and several others stormed in and threw themselves on the floor. Your Majesty cannot keep leaving without warning. And taking the crown prince? The floods are getting worse. 3 urgent reports are waiting. How can you neglect the nation like this? Old Li, the emperor, knew he was in the wrong, so he let them vent. Then the finance minister delivered the bad news. The flood relief now needed 200,000 taels, and the treasury could only manage 100,000 at most. In the past, the emperor would have immediately emptied his personal savings to cover the gap. But this time he did something different. If the treasury can't pay and my personal funds can't pay, then let's take a collection from the officials. Tomorrow at court, we'll see how much my devoted ministers are willing to contribute. The ministers' faces went blank. They'd come to squeeze money out of the emperor, and now the emperor was squeezing them. Li Yinsong tried to redirect. Perhaps we should send the 100,000 first? Time is critical. No rush. Let's wait. The ministers were stunned. The emperor had changed. Before, he would have thrown money at the problem instantly. Now he was calm, strategic, almost calculating. They didn't know it, but he was calm because he had my boundless merit on the way. He wasn't gambling with people's lives. He already had a plan. He just wanted to use the crisis to squeeze some donations out of his rich officials before revealing the solution. My business lessons were rubbing off on the emperor in ways I never intended. And honestly, if I'd known he was applying hunger marketing principles to disaster relief funding, I might have been a little proud. Or terrified. Probably terrified. I wasn't there for any of this, but I pieced the story together later. After old Lee dropped his boy off at the inner city gate, the kid started walking home through the capital for the first time in his life. His first real look at the world outside the palace walls. It didn't go well. The streets were just packed dirt, still muddy from recent rain. Puddles everywhere. Every few steps brought a new smell. Rot, fish guts, sewage. Never anything pleasant. The houses were made of rammed earth and cheap timber, walls uneven and crumbling, window frames cracked and gray from weather. The only polished surface on any door was the greasy black stain in the middle where thousands of hands had pushed it open over the years. The boy stood there staring, and for the first time it hit him. His tutors had told him that commoners were uneducated and uncivilized, that life outside the palace was rough. But they'd never said it was this bad. And this was the capital, the heart of the empire. He'd just spent 2 days in my little county, where the streets were paved with stone, the buildings were clean and new, and even the poorest person looked healthy. Now he was standing in the emperor's own city, and it looked like a garbage pit compared to Tiwan. Was I some kind of saint? No, the boy knew better than that. But if my people didn't read the classics and still lived well, while the capital's people supposedly had access to civilization's finest teachings and lived like this, something didn't add up. Guetianyang caught up with him and explained that this area near the North Gate was newer, filled with refugees and migrants from the last few years. Walk further in. It gets better. The boy shook his head. No, I want to see the outer city. Guetianyang nearly had a stroke. The outer city was even worse, full of rough characters, and the prince was wearing silk like a lamb walking into a wolf den. But the boy was already moving. Guetianyang signaled the hidden guards and followed. The outer city was everything he feared. More people, more noise, more stench. Children played in filth. Women washed clothes in dirty water by the roadside. The air was thick enough to chew. Then a woman opened her door and flung a basin of kitchen waste into the street. Fish heads, scales, blood, rotting vegetables. It splashed across the ground and speckled the boy's boots. The boy doubled over and gagged. Guetianyang jumped in front of the woman, furious. You wretch! How dare you splash garbage on my young master? The guards reached for their weapons. The woman dropped her basin and fell to her knees, shaking. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. The boy straightened up. He'd been about to yell at her, but something stopped him. She was kneeling in the mud, trembling, repeating the same 2 sentences. His anger faded. Then he asked something nobody expected. What are you eating? The woman blinked. Fish. Stewed fish. Get up. Let me see. He walked right past her into the house. Guetianyang's eyes nearly fell out of his head. The crown prince of the empire had just barged into a commoner's shack to look at fish soup. Inside was dark and cramped. 1 window, 2 rooms separated by a cloth curtain. The kitchen doubled as the living room. On the stove, a pot bubbled with murky yellow liquid that was supposed to be fish soup. It smelled bad. The boy looked around slowly, taking everything in. Then he turned to the woman. You eat this? She stammered that the soup was for her husband, not her. She pulled back the curtain. A gaunt man lay on a bed with his right leg wrapped in bandages, sleeping. He'd broken it on a construction job. What do you normally eat? The boy asked. He was starting to understand something. In Tuyuan, I'd built flush toilets, paved roads, and served stir-fried pork belly. Here in the capital, the richest city in the nation, a woman was cooking rotten fish in a dark room for her crippled husband and throwing the guts into the street because there was nowhere else to put them. The boy who'd spent his whole life watching tigers fight horses was finally seeing the real world. And I think it was breaking something open inside him. I wasn't there for any of this, but the story made its way back to me eventually. The boy, Old Lee's son, was still walking through the outer city when things took a turn. The woman whose fish guts had splashed his boots brought out a small bowl to show him what she actually ate every day. It was a paste, grain husks, yellow millet, wild greens, and a bit of salt, all mashed together. It looked terrible and smelled sour. The boy couldn't believe it. People eat this? Yes, sir. My family eats this every day. He stared at the bowl. In Tuyuan, he'd watched ordinary people squatting on the street eating proper meals. Rice, vegetables, meat, everything looking normal. This gray slop was something else entirely. Can I try it? Gua Tianyong lunged for the bowl, practically crying. You can't eat this. If you get sick, your father will kill me. Then you eat it. Gua Tianyong clutched the bowl and stared at the boy with pleading eyes. The boy snatched it back and kicked him away. He looked at the paste. His courage wavered. Then he scraped up a tiny bit with his fingertip and put it in his mouth. Sour, bitter, stale, a faint hint of salt. The taste spread through his mouth and his stomach revolted instantly. He bent over and threw up everything, coughing and choking, tears and snot streaming down his face. The bowl crashed to the floor. Gua Tianyong rushed over, patting his back. The woman in the corner wanted to help too. She stepped forward trembling, reaching out her hand. The boy shoved her away so hard she stumbled. How dare you? You tricked me. You could have killed me, Gua Tianyong yelled for the guards. 5 or 6 men burst through the door, filling the tiny room. The boy was furious, chest heaving. He thought the woman had played him for a fool. Then her husband heard the commotion and dragged himself out of bed on his broken leg. He saw the crowd of armed men and dropped to his knees in terror. What did we do? What's happening? Gua Tianyong pointed at the spilled paste. Your wife told my young master this garbage was edible. You lying peasants. The man's face went white. But it is edible. I'll show you. He got down on all fours and started eating the paste right off the floor, scooping it into his mouth with his hands, not even flinching. The boy froze. It really was food. This man ate it every day. It wasn't poison or a trick. The taste that had made a prince vomit was just dinner. Gua Tianyong leaned close and whispered, Your Highness, this is what common people eat. You're just not used to it. The boy's face went from white to deep red. Shame hit him like a wave. He'd screamed at a crippled man's wife, called her a liar, shoved her, all because he couldn't stomach what they survived on daily. He kicked Gua Tianyong. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You idiot. Gua Tianyong rubbed his backside. He tried to stop the boy from eating it in the first place, but sure, blame the eunuch. Story of his life. The boy looked at the husband still kneeling on the floor with dirt on his face and paste on his chin. His shame deepened. Get up, please, get up. The man stood unsteadily. The boy's voice went quiet. I threw up in your home and ate your food. I owe you. Gwada, give them 10 taels. The man waved his hands. No, sir. That food isn't worth anything. Take it. That's an order. Gua Tianyong slapped the silver note into the man's palm. The boy turned and fled the house without another word. Outside, he walked in silence. Gua Tianyong caught up and said gently, Let's go back to the palace. The boy didn't answer right away. Then he asked, Do the young eunuchs in the palace live in houses like that? Eat food like that? Gua Tianyong tried to lighten things up. Oh no, the palace is 100 times better than this. Even the worst quarters are much nicer. And the food is far better. What did you eat before you entered the palace? The old eunuch went quiet for a moment, remembering his own childhood. Probably worse than them. Having porridge every day would have been luxury. Eating once every 2 or 3 days was normal. But don't worry, Your Highness. The war only ended 2 years ago. Some people are still struggling, but things will get better. The boy nodded slowly. Then something clicked. So that's why so many people are willing to become eunuchs. Gua Tianyong had nothing to say to that. And me? I was back in Tianwen, completely unaware that my comfortable little paradise had accidentally become the standard by which a future emperor would judge his entire nation. Every clean street I'd paved, every pork stew I'd served, every stupid flush toilet I'd installed. It was all rattling around in that boy's head now, measuring the distance between what his people had and what they deserved. I'd have been flattered, honestly, and also terrified, because the closer that boy got to caring about his people, the closer he got to dragging me out of retirement to help him fix the mess. I heard about this part much later, and honestly, I wish I'd been there to see the emperor's face. That evening, the boy marched into the emperor's study looking like he'd just solved every problem in the world. The emperor was buried in a mountain of reports. Every minister in the empire was screaming for flood money, and he was rejecting them all, one by one. He couldn't tell anyone why. He couldn't say, "Don't worry, I bought something called boundless merit from a county nobody's heard of." If the plan failed, the history books would roast him forever. So he just kept saying no and sweating. Then the boy walked in, chest puffed out. "Father, I went to the outer city today. I have many insights." The emperor leaned back. "Let's hear it. First, the housing. Buildings are crammed together with no planning. Dark alleys breed crime. The court should design proper neighborhoods, build uniform houses, and sell them to the people. The government makes money. The people get better homes." The emperor tapped his fingers. "Not bad. Continue." The boy was gaining confidence now. "The streets are filthy. We need stone paving like Tuyuan, sanitation officers, fines for dumping garbage, and underground pipes to carry the waste away." "How would you build the pipes? Where would the waste go? How far? How much would it cost? How many workers? What about mountains and valleys in the way?" The boy froze for half a second, then recovered brilliantly. "Those are details. I'd assign Magistrate Fong to figure it out. A ruler's job is strategy, not plumbing. Delegate the small stuff." "Small stuff." The emperor's eye twitched, but he kept his composure. "Fine. Skip ahead to the important part." The boy took a deep breath. "Today I entered a commoner's home. It was barely a house, dark, tiny, falling apart. There was fish soup cooking, but it looked disgusting. That was for the sick husband." Then I asked what they normally ate. The wife showed me a bowl of porridge made from grain husks, wild vegetables, and a pinch of salt. It was gray mush that smelled sour. I tasted it. The emperor sat up straight. "You actually ate it?" "Yes." Hua Tianyang can confirm. Hua Tianyang was called in and nervously verified the story, carefully leaving out the part where the prince vomited, shoved a woman, and almost had the guards arrest an injured man over porridge. The emperor felt something he hadn't expected: joy. His son was useless in 100 ways. Lazy, uneducated, stubborn, obsessed with animal fights, couldn't tell wheat from rice. But today, for the first time, the boy had walked into a poor person's home, tasted their food, felt their pain, and given them money from his own pocket. A ruler could learn skills. A ruler could study strategy. But you couldn't teach someone to care about people. Either they felt it, or they didn't. The emperor laughed out loud. "Huh. Well done. You are truly my son. You went out, you saw the people suffering, you felt it. This trip was worth everything. Now tell me your insights." The boy was glowing. "My tutors always said the common people suffer because they don't study the classics. But do the people of Tuyuan read classics? No. They read simple stories in plain language. And yet they live better than anyone in the capital. The answer is literacy. Plain language writing is easy to learn. If people can read, they become educated. The court should promote plain language writing across the whole empire. Once everyone can read, poverty will disappear." The emperor's smile started fading. "The people in the capital live like animals, eating slop, living in hovels. It's clearly a failure of policy. If I were emperor, I would make sure every citizen get out. But I haven't finished. Out." Hua Tianyang's face had gone green somewhere around. Living like animals. Telling the emperor that his capital was worse than a pig pen was essentially slapping him across the face. The boy had taken my arguments about plain language books, mixed them with one afternoon of poverty tourism, and accidentally told his father that his entire reign was a failure. The boy was thrown out of the study, still convinced his ideas were brilliant. And me? I was the invisible hand behind all of this. My books, my streets, my flush toilets, my pork stew. Everything the boy had seen in Tuyuan had become the lens through which he now judged the world. He'd taken my county as the standard and found the empire wanting. I would have been proud, except for the part where the emperor was probably adding this to my tab. Every time his son said something outrageous, it somehow came back to me. I was busy preparing the boundless merit shipment back in Tuyuan while the capital was tearing itself apart over the floods. The next morning at court, the emperor sat on his throne with the crown prince placed beside him. Apparently the boy was being brought to court sessions now as training. First time for everything. The mood was tense. Nobody spoke at first. Then before Chief Minister Li Yensong could even open his mouth, the Minister of War, a man named Feng Jie, jumped in with urgent news. The situation at Jianjiang had gotten worse. Much worse. The floods had gone on so long that a rebel group had formed, the water god cult, led by a so-called holy woman. It was made up of remnants from the old Qin kingdom, and they were using the disaster to recruit desperate flood refugees. Thousands of people had joined. They were spreading across the region, stirring up trouble, and the local troops didn't have enough men to handle both the flood relief and the rebels. The military was requesting 15,000 reinforcements. The ministers erupted. Some wanted to send money immediately. Others wanted troops sent right away. Everyone was panicking. The emperor slapped the armrest of his throne. Silence. These are just leftovers from a dead kingdom playing at being a cult. You're all overreacting. Then he got to the real issue. The flood must be solved, but the treasury is empty. I'll contribute another 10,000 taels from my personal funds. As for the rest, I'm asking all of you, my loyal ministers, to donate. The room went dead quiet. Ministers started looking at their shoes, at the ceiling, anywhere but at the emperor. Like students praying the teacher won't call on them. Li Yinsong sighed, stepped forward, and said, I'll donate 5,000 taels. The other senior ministers followed. Zhang Dongxiang offered 4,000. Zheng Qiao matched it. That broke the dam. The rest of the officials started pledging, from thousands down to hundreds, all the way down to a few pathetic tens of taels from the junior officials. The grand total, 34,000 taels. From the entire court of the empire. The emperor looked at the number, and his face darkened. He'd made more than that selling my tea in 3 days. He wanted to shame them by revealing the tea profits, but then realized that would hurt future sales. So he swallowed it and said instead, I'm amazed at how clean my officials are. So many people and barely 40,000 taels between you all. Dead silence. Everyone shifted nervously. The finance minister urged him to send whatever they had right away. The emperor agreed, but only partially. He ordered 15,000 troops to Jianjiang to crush the water god cult and sent along just 20,000 taels for flood relief. The ministers were stunned. They had over 100,000 taels collected now. Why only send 20,000? The emperor was cold about it. How long will this flood last? Can any of you tell me? If it goes on for another month, do I send another 200,000? This is a bottomless pit. We send what we can and watch the situation. He was stalling. He couldn't tell them the real reason. That somewhere on a boat heading south, 20 of my men were carrying enough gunpowder to blow a mountain into a river. If it worked, the flooding would stop and the money would be saved. If it didn't, he'd look like a fool who gambled with people's lives. But he believed in me. Or at least, he believed enough to hold his nerve for a few more days. The ministers exchanged worried looks. Zhang Dongxiang whispered to Li Yinsong, the emperor seems different. Something's off. Li Yinsong replied quietly, I don't know. He has his reasons. We wait and see. And me? I was back in Tiyuan checking on my gunpowder stockpile, making sure my team was properly briefed, and trying not to think too hard about the fact that I'd just bet the lives of thousands of people on a homemade explosive recipe I'd mixed from memory in a world where nobody had ever heard of gunpowder. No pressure at all. My team made it to Intoa after days of traveling. Water route first, then overland. I'd sent 20 of my best men, all veterans from when we blasted open the asphalt mine years ago. They knew how to handle explosives better than anyone in the world. Their captain was Ding Kai, my most experienced mining foreman. Tough as nails, cool under pressure. The problem? When they arrived, the weather was terrible. The briefing had said light rain. What they got was a full storm. Pouring rain, lightning cracking across the sky, wind howling through the mountains. Not exactly ideal conditions for carrying gunpowder up a mountainside. Ding Kai didn't flinch. He ordered everyone to double-check their equipment, oil paper wrapping, waterproof sleeves around every charge and fuse. If water got into the gunpowder, the whole mission was finished. Then he reminded them of the bonus. 1,000 taels of silver per man when we get home. That got everyone moving. Old Li had arranged about 200 armed escorts, supposedly hired by his merchant contacts. Their leader was a man named Cheng Si, who turned out to be an imperial guard in disguise. At first Cheng Si looked down on my miners, thinking they were just country laborers. But after a few days on the boat together, he changed his mind fast. My guys stripped down and had muscles like iron. When they arm wrestled with the imperial guards, supposedly the best fighters in the empire, they tied 50-50. Cheng Si stopped talking trash after that. With the storm raging, Over 200 men strapped explosive packs to their backs, some weighing 50 jin, others over 100, and started climbing the mountain. The rain made the ground slippery and dangerous. Communication was impossible except by shouting. Ding Kai walked at the front, carrying the lightest load so he could scout the path and find the best blast points. At one point, someone behind him cried out. A guard had twisted his ankle. Cheng Si yelled that it was nothing serious. They kept going. Halfway up, Ding Kai spotted a natural crack in the rock face and nearly danced with joy. A pre-existing fault line meant they needed far less explosive to bring the peak down. Stop here. Drop everything. This is our spot. The men piled the charges together. Ding Kai had them lash the packs into a chain with rope, split the fuses into 2 lines, wrapped everything in waterproof sleeves, and lowered the charges into the crack. Then his men unspooled the fuse lines all the way back down the mountain, while checking constantly for water damage. When everyone was safely at the bottom, Cheng Si looked confused. We're back down already? How do you blow up a mountain from here? Ding Kai grinned and held up the fuse. Watch and learn. Give me your fire striker. He touched the flame to the fuse. It hissed and vanished into the protective sleeve, racing uphill. Everyone down. Cover your ERS. The ground shook. Boom, 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 boom. Pillars of rock and debris shot into the sky. The entire mountain peak shuddered and started to lean. Cheng Si's face went white. His whole body was shaking. Most of his men had their heads buried between their knees, trembling. Some of them had fought in real wars, seen real battlefields, and none of it compared to this. The first blast wasn't quite enough. The peak was tilting but hadn't fallen. Ding Kai lit the second fuse without hesitation. Boom, 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 boom. The mountain's base gave way. The peak toppled in slow motion, crashing into the river below. Massive boulders smashed into the water, sending up walls of spray. The river's path was blocked. My miners erupted in cheers. IT worked. They were already calculating their bonuses, 1,000 taels each, plus drinks and a bath at the best places in Tuyuan when they got home. Cheng Si and his guards stood there with their mouths hanging open, legs like jelly. When he finally recovered enough to speak, he asked quietly, Do the other mountain too? Ding Kai was riding high. Of course. Let's finish the job and go home. I hate this place. They started toward the second peak. Cheng Si ordered his men to move out. Half of them tried to stand and immediately collapsed. Captain, our legs won't work. Cheng Si's face went red. My miners burst out laughing. These supposedly elite Imperial guards had gone weak in the knees from one explosion. My guys remembered their own first time at the asphalt mine. They'd been just as bad, but they weren't about to admit that. After a rest, they repeated the process on the second mountain. More climbing, more blasting, more earth-shaking thunder. The second peak came crashing down into the river. The floodwaters began flowing away from the towns, redirected exactly as planned. Ding Kai shouted through the rain, Boys, 1,000 taels each. Drinks at Qingchong House. Meat. Hot bath at Tiandapool. My treat. 20 miners cheered like madmen in the downpour. Behind them, Cheng Si and his 200 guards watched with bitter, envious faces. They'd risked the same dangers, climbed the same mountain, and carried the same loads. But they worked for the palace, which meant they got nothing. My guys worked for me, and they were going home rich. The difference between working for an emperor and working for Fang Jingyi, apparently, was about 1,000 taels per head. Young master, wake up. The miners are back. Xiao Tao was standing over my bed looking exasperated. I mumbled something about giving them their money and rolled over. She shook me harder. The miners from the flood relief are back. That woke me up. I'd almost forgotten. 20 men, tons of gunpowder, a mission to blow up mountains. And now they were home. I jumped out of bed and ran out without even washing my face. The miners were waiting in the courtyard, grinning like idiots. Ding Kai rushed forward. Sir, we did it. Everything went perfectly, no injuries. Beautiful. The fire sale on my surplus explosives had worked out brilliantly. Got rid of dangerous stockpile, earned tens of thousands of taels, and apparently saved a few thousand lives in the process. Old Li was going to make a fortune off this. His reputation would skyrocket. Then Ding Kai got sheepish. There's one thing. We picked someone up on the way back. Picked someone up? The miners stepped aside. Lying on the ground was what looked like a mud-covered animal curled into a ball. I couldn't even tell it was human at first. What I asked that? Ding Kai scratched his head. It's a person. Found them on the road, barely alive. We've been pouring broth into their mouth for days. Still breathing. Anyway, he's yours now, sir. We're off. And the whole group bolted before I could say a word. Those ungrateful scoundrels. Dump a half-dead stranger on my doorstep and run. I told Xiaotao to get the person cleaned up and sent to the clinic. Then I turned my attention to the real priority, collecting my debt from Old Li. I told Zhang Biao to watch the gates. The moment Old Li showed up, I wanted him brought straight to me. What I didn't know was that back in the capital, things had gotten extremely ugly. The emperor had been under siege for over 10 days. Every single day, ministers stormed into court demanding he release funds for Jianjiang. The floods were getting worse. Reports came in daily. More dams broken, more people displaced. A rebel cult called the Water God sect had sprung up, led by remnants of the old Qin kingdom, recruiting desperate refugees. The southern officials were losing their minds. Some had family in the flood zone. Arguments turned into fistfights right there in the court hall. It happened more than once. The emperor held firm, day after day, but the pressure was crushing him. He kept wondering, had my team succeeded? Why was there no word? If we'd failed and he'd done nothing for 2 weeks, history would remember him as a monster who let his people drown. Then one morning, a low-ranking official named Chen Shu, a supervising censor from the finance ministry, whose family lived in Jianjiang, finally snapped. Your Majesty, the people are suffering. It has been over 10 days since the plea for help, and still no action. I must ask, what is Your Majesty thinking? How will future generations judge this moment? He slammed his forehead to the floor. Other officials dropped to their knees behind him. We beg Your Majesty to reconsider. The emperor erupted. Chen Shu, are you lecturing me? Chen Shu kept going, driven by desperation. The emperor, furious, threatened to confiscate his entire estate and send the proceeds to Jianjiang. Then he offered to give Chen Shu the imperial horse so he could ride down to the flood zone himself. Chief Minister Li Yinsong stepped in to calm things down. He asked quietly, Your Majesty, we simply don't understand why you refuse to act. Can you help us understand? The emperor went silent. He looked out at the sea of confused, angry faces. His confidence was cracking. No news from my team. No confirmation. Nothing. Maybe he'd been wrong to trust me. Maybe the whole plan had failed, and he'd wasted 2 precious weeks. He was about to give in, about to order the full treasury release, when a young eunuch came crashing through the doors of the hall, tripping over himself, screaming at the top of his lungs. Urgent report. Urgent news from Jianjiang. The entire hall froze. And 1,000 miles away, I was sitting in my office scratching my head over a mud-covered stranger, completely unaware that my homemade gunpowder had just rewritten the history of the empire. Back in Tiyuan, Xiaotao woke me up with the news that the miners were home. I stumbled out without washing my face. Ding Kai was beaming. Sir, we did it. No injuries. I was thrilled. The explosives were gone, the money was coming, and apparently thousands of people weren't going to drown. Not a bad return on some old gunpowder I'd been terrified would blow up my warehouse. Then Ding Kai got awkward. We, picked someone up on the road. They stepped aside to reveal what looked like a mud sculpture of a person curled up on the ground. I couldn't even tell if it was alive. We've been pouring broth into it for days. Still breathing. Anyway, he's yours now. Bye. The whole group scattered before I could object. Unbelievable. I told Xiaotao to get the mud creature washed and sent to the clinic, then went back to planning how to squeeze my debt payment out of Old Li. Meanwhile, at the palace, things had reached a breaking point. The emperor had been stonewalling the entire court for over 2 weeks. Every day, ministers screamed at him to send money to Jianjiang. Every day, he said, wait. The floods were worsening. A rebel cult was growing. Southern officials were physically fighting each other in the hall. That morning, a censor named Chen Shu finally lost it. He stood up and essentially called the emperor negligent to his face. How will history judge this? The people are drowning and you do nothing. The emperor exploded and threatened to confiscate Chen Shu's entire estate. The tension was unbearable. Even Chief Minister Li Yinsong stepped in, gently asking why the emperor refused to act. The emperor hesitated. For the first time, doubt crept in. No news from my team. No confirmation. Maybe he'd been wrong to trust me. Maybe it had all failed. He was about to cave and release the funds. Then a eunuch came crashing through the doors screaming, Urgent report from Jianjiang. The emperor snatched the document and read it. His eyes went wide. Then he threw his head back and laughed. He held the report up for everyone to see. This is why I waited. The Jianjiang flood is no longer a problem. He tossed it at Chen Shu's feet. The censor picked it up and read aloud, his voice trembling. The two mountain peaks at Intawa had collapsed. The river was blocked. The floodwaters had been redirected east. The crisis was largely over. Chen Shu's face went white. He'd just publicly attacked the emperor, and now the emperor had been proven right all along. Then a second messenger arrived with more good news. The army had reached Jianjiang, and the water god cult had scattered without a fight once the flood stopped. Their so-called holy woman, apparently a princess from the fallen Qian kingdom, had disappeared. The court erupted. Ministers looked at the emperor like he was some kind of prophet. How had he known the mountains would fall? The emperor savored the moment. Then he revealed my existence. The credit belongs to someone else. The magistrate of a place called Tuyuan County, a young man named Fang Jingyi. He possesses the method to split mountains. I made a deal with him in secret. Nobody had ever heard of Tuyuan. Nobody had heard of me. The emperor was visibly impressed that I'd kept such a tight lid on things for so many years. Then came the question of my reward. Li Yinsong suggested promoting me 2 ranks and giving me a position in the finance ministry. Other ministers agreed. A 5-rank official at my age was already generous. The emperor frowned. That's not enough. The hall went quiet. I promised this man that whoever solved the crisis could receive the highest honors. I intend to grant him a noble title, with Tuyuan County as his personal domain. Furthermore, the crown prince visited Tuyuan and returned a changed person. I want Fang Jingyi appointed to the crown prince's advisory office as junior advisor. That was huge. The advisory office was where future emperors were shaped. Everyone currently in the senior cabinet had served there. Getting appointed meant being a candidate for the most powerful positions in the empire. Zhang Dongxiang objected. He's too young. He's barely older than the crown prince. How can he teach the heir? Before the emperor could respond, the crown prince himself jumped in. Zhang Dongxiang. Magistrate Fang is perfect for the job. I spent 1 day in Tuyuan and learned more than I have in years. Ask tutor Yin if I haven't been studying harder since I came back. Everyone turned to Yin Goen, the crown prince's actual tutor. The poor man squirmed and admitted, it's true. Since returning from his trip, the prince has been studying diligently. He's even memorized several books. Yin Goen wanted to sink through the floor. He'd spent years failing to make the prince study, and some unknown county magistrate had accomplished it accidentally. Zhang Dongxiang closed his mouth. If I could make the crown prince voluntarily read books, I deserved whatever title they wanted to give me. The emperor surveyed the silent court. Any further objections? If not, I'll issue the decree. And just like that, without my knowledge or consent, I was promoted from a nobody county magistrate to a titled nobleman and the crown prince's personal advisor. My quiet little life was officially over. I was sitting there reading my favorite book and laughing like an idiot while little Tao rolled her eyes at me. Ever since the emperor visited, I discovered a whole new world at the bookstalls. Life had been boring, but now I had these fun stories to read, kind of like fantasy novels. My absolute favorite was County Magistrate Fang's great battle against Thanos. They wrote me as this incredible hero collecting infinity stones, and of course I picked up a bunch of beautiful women along the way. The part about the emperor fighting Thanos? Barely mentioned. I loved it so much I sent Zhang Biao to find the author and pressure him to write faster. The book was already on its 3rd volume. Thanos builds Peach Blossom County. Many children, much happiness. After finishing the last chapter, I sipped my tea and sighed. We really do have talented people in this county. But the chapters were too short. Maybe I should lock this writer in a room and make him write 10,000 words a day. With nothing else to do, I asked little Tao if anything interesting had happened lately. She said not really, just the usual gossip. But then she mentioned that the person the miners brought back had woken up. That caught my attention. A new resident for Peach Blossom County. If we're lucky, maybe even a skilled worker. We took a sedan chair straight to the clinic. The doctor led me upstairs where the patient was resting behind a white curtain. He said she kept drifting in and out of consciousness, mumbling nonsense. Then he added, with wide eyes, that she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen in his entire life. I shooed him away and pulled back the curtain. My breath caught. She looked about 16, with dark hair spread across the pillow, skin white as cream with a rosy glow. perfect features, and impossibly long legs. Even asleep, there was a cold elegance about her and a sadness between her brows that made you feel sorry for her. I couldn't believe it. The half-dead creature we dragged back turned out to be a stunning beauty. But looking at her skin and her whole appearance, she was definitely no ordinary commoner. This woman had a story. Then something occurred to me, and I turned to Little Tao. You arranged for her to come to the clinic yesterday. Who washed her? Little Tao rolled her eyes again. Women, obviously. You think we'd let a man do it? Are you interested in her, young master? I put on my most serious face. Nonsense. Am I that kind of person? I was just thinking. If a man had done it and word got out, how would she ever live that down? I'm simply thinking of her well-being. Sure you are, Little Tao said. Just as the woman's eyelids began to flutter, the doctor came rushing back upstairs, drenched in sweat, looking terrified. Master, there's an imperial decree. What? Slow down and speak clearly. He caught his breath and said it again. An imperial decree from the capital. Zhang Biao had brought the messengers, and they were all waiting downstairs. Little Tao went pale. I was shocked too. An imperial decree? Here? In Peach Blossom County? But I steadied myself and waved my hand. Don't panic. Let's go see what this is about. Downstairs, half the county had already surrounded the clinic. The little eunuch delivering the decree looked nervous. People in the crowd were holding sickles and rakes, looking ready for trouble. He couldn't understand why the whole town had shown up just for a decree. When I came down, the crowd parted for me. The eunuch straightened up and squeaked, Are you Fang Jingyi, leader of Peach Blossom County? I bowed. That's me. Kneel to receive the decree. Zhang Biao stepped out from the side, staring the eunuch down with that intense look of his. The eunuch panicked immediately. Standing is fine too. I smiled politely. I'm a court-appointed official. Of course I'll kneel for His Majesty's decree. I just need to verify it's authentic first. I hope you understand. The eunuch relaxed a little. Of course, of course. He cleared his throat and began in that high-pitched voice. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees. The little eunuch read the decree. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor declares that County Magistrate Fang Jingyi's great contribution in solving the Jianzhong flood saved countless lives. Furthermore, since taking charge of Peach Blossom County, he has fulfilled his duties faithfully and earned the love of his people. The emperor is pleased and hereby grants Fang Jingyi the noble title of Baron of Peach Blossom County, 200 acres of permanent farmland, a stipend of 200 households, and the position of junior supervisor of the heir's office. He is to enter the palace immediately without delay. When he finished, everyone just froze. I was staring at him blankly too. The eunuch got nervous. Lord Fang, will you accept the decree? Before I could say anything, the crowd started wailing. Someone cried out, They're taking our magistrate away. You can't leave. We need you. Nobody's taking him. It's that damn eunuch's fault. Kill him. Yeah? Kill him. We'll pretend none of this happened. The crowd surged forward. People in the back were waving their farming tools, trying to push to the front to get at the eunuch. Their logic was simple. If the eunuch disappeared, the decree was never delivered. One day at a time. The magistrate stays no matter what. The poor eunuch collapsed to the ground, shaking like a leaf, holding up the decree with a trembling hand. Lord Fang, please, accept the decree. I can't take this anymore. His pathetic performance finally snapped me out of it. I yelled at the crowd, Shut up, all of you. I'm not dead yet. Have some manners. They quieted down, though a few in the front row were still wiping tears, muttering, But you still can't leave. I shouted, Go home. I'm the Baron of Peach Blossom County now. What are you panicking about? Even if I leave, nobody else is coming to replace me. Then I turned to the eunuch with my best flattering smile. So sorry about that, sir. Just curious. How did His Majesty find out I sent people to help with the flood? He managed a weak smile. You'll have to ask at the palace. I just delivered decrees. I don't know anything. It had to be Li Long who sold me out. That bastard. Next time I see him, I'm skinning him alive. And here was the real problem. Yes, getting the official title to Peach Blossom County was great, but I'd been secretly expanding the county's territory way beyond what was allowed. If anyone discovered that, I'd be in deep trouble. But that was a problem for later. I took a deep breath, grabbed the eunuch's hands, and smiled. Don't worry about these people. This is the middle of nowhere. They're all rough peasants. Let me show you around. The scenery here is quite nice. He forced a smile. That's kind of you. But I need to report back to the palace immediately. You should pack up and head out soon too. Of course. Zhang Biao. Zhang Biao walked over with that intense stare of his. I gave him a signal, and he quickly shoved a bag of silver into the eunuch's sleeve. Problem was, the silver was so heavy it dragged the eunuch sideways, and he toppled over onto the ground. That was the last straw. The eunuch burst into tears. Lord Fong, I never did anything to you. What is this? I kicked Zhang Biao and hissed, idiot. Who told you to give him that much? A few taels would have been fine. Zhang Biao grinned sheepishly, then squatted down and snatched the silver back. My face got even darker. I helped the eunuch up, looking apologetic. Sorry about him. He's a bit. I tapped my head. Then I patted myself down looking for some money. All I found were 5 copper coins. I slipped them into his sleeve. The eunuch heard them clink and looked like he wanted to cry again. Lord Fong, please take those back. If the palace finds out I accepted a bribe, I'll be punished. I put on my most righteous face. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone. I really can't. Well then, I'm sorry for all the trouble. I reached back into his sleeve, rummaged around, and pulled out what I grabbed. 2 silver taels and 5 copper coins. I blinked, twitched, then stuffed it all into my own pocket without changing expression. The eunuch stared at me with his jaw hanging open. Lord Fong, can I go now? I waved him off. Yeah, go ahead. He jumped on his horse and galloped away like his life depended on it. Little Tao came up to me looking worried. Young master, that wasn't great. He's from the palace, I sighed. So what? I've already offended him. Might as well go all the way. I turned to the crowd again. Go home, everyone. Peach Blossom County is still under my authority. Get back to whatever you were doing. Someone stepped forward nervously. Sir, you won't leave us, right? They all looked at me with those hopeful eyes. I won't lie. I was moved. But I hardened my face and growled. What if I am leaving? I got promoted. Aren't you happy for me? Smile. The whole crowd burst into tears at once. It was like I'd died. People were wailing and throwing themselves around. What will we do without you? I'll go to the capital and file a complaint with the emperor. You can't leave. If you go, I won't live anymore. What about my daughter? She's only 8. She was going to marry you someday. Your daughter? My daughter is 15. At least meet her. Just meet her. Things were getting out of hand. I softened my expression and said, all right. I'm just going to the capital for a bit. I'm leaving, but I'm coming back. Now scatter before I change my mind and stay in the capital forever. You're driving me crazy. Before I could even finish my sentence, the crowd vanished. Everyone bolted in every direction, gone in seconds. I looked at the mess they left behind and shook my head with a bitter laugh. These crazy people. We were about to head back to the county office when a voice like silver bells called out from behind. Lord Fong, please wait. It was the girl from the clinic. She was leaning weakly against the doorframe, looking my way. She must have been standing there watching the whole scene. My name is Bai. Thank you for saving my life, my lord. My head was a mess. I had no time for this. I just wanted to get back to the office and make arrangements before leaving for the capital. If I went to the capital, I probably wouldn't be back anytime soon. The rewards were way too generous. A noble title was already huge, but on top of that they gave me a position in the heir's office. Something about this whole thing felt wrong. I told little Tao to help her, and we'd deal with it later. Bai coughed a couple of times and knelt down. She said her entire family had died in the flood, she had nowhere to go, and she wanted to serve me to repay the debt of saving her life. I looked at her. Now that she was awake, her features were even more striking. That already stunning face had come alive. But something felt off about her too. How did she even know I was the one who saved her? The doctor told me, she said. I woke up a few times and he mentioned it. I asked where she was from and what her family did. She said she was from Jianjiang, and her family was in the porcelain business. Then she started crying, softly, pitifully. Little Tao was moved. She'd lost her own parents young, and if she hadn't met me, who knows what would have happened to her. She went over to comfort the girl. I watched carefully. The grief seemed real enough. I'd seen plenty of orphans in Peach Blossom County, and they all looked like that. But the second she said, porcelain, my head started pounding. It was a porcelain merchant named Li Long who ruined my peaceful life in the first place. So I said flatly, got it. The flood's over now. Get better, then go home. Little Tao, give her some travel money when she leaves. Let's go. I turned and walked away, leaving Bai standing there stunned. Behind me, she was probably touching her own face, wondering what went wrong. I bet no man had ever brushed her off like that in her entire 16 years of life. Then I realized I forgot something and walked back. Her face lit up. I could see it, that little flash of triumph. She probably thought I was playing hard to get. She quickly put on her sad, pitiful expression again. Lord Fong. Oh right, I forgot to mention, once you get home and sort out your family's affairs, send back the travel money and the medical fees. I know you've been through a lot, miss, but the landlord's cupboard is bare too. Hope you understand. Little Tao, let's go. I turned around and left again. Bai Yi's face went red. She stared at my back with eyes as wide as saucers. Then she started coughing violently, blood seeping through her fingers. She'd never been humiliated like this in her life. A mere county magistrate treating her this way. But then she must have thought about the fact that I'd just been made a baron at my age, and that I was heading to the heir's office. She clenched her fists, bit her lip, and stumbled after me. Up ahead, I was cursing about the sedan share carriers who had run off with the crowd. Those bastards. When they come to collect their pay, give them half. You hear me? Zhang Biao glanced behind us. Young master, that woman is following us. I looked back. Sure enough, Bai Yi was staggering after us. One step forward, two gasps for air. She's still chasing me even in that condition? Is she glued to me now? Run. The three of us broke into a jog. Bai Yi tried to smile and wave when I looked back, but I just turned around and kept running. She stood there frozen, her heart probably a mess of sour, bitter, and spicy feelings. Everything except sweet. Then she coughed up blood and collapsed in the empty street as the sun was setting. Next thing I knew, I was standing over her unconscious body on a stretcher. There was blood on her chest. She looked even worse than before. Zhang Biao, are you a pig? This woman is clearly trying to latch on to me, and you carried her back here, he mumbled. She looked like she wanted to talk to you, so I thought I'd bring her. I had no energy left to argue. Fine. Whatever. She's already here. Take her to the clinic. The second she's better, send her away. But just as Zhang Biao was about to take her, the supposedly unconscious Bai Yi suddenly reached out and grabbed my pant leg. She started sobbing in her sleep. Father. Mother. Bai Yi misses you so much. Little Tao gave me a pleading look. Young master, can't we just let her stay? She has no parents, nowhere to go. It's not like one more person will make a difference here. I crouched down and studied Bai Yi's face closely. She was still, unconscious, murmuring heartbreaking things, the kind of stuff that would make anyone cry. I rubbed my chin. Something about this woman was just off. Who talks this coherently in their sleep? Little Tao, tickle her.